para nosotros, porque la verdad, con este tiempo que estamos viviendo con la pandemia, hemos pasado unos momentos muy difíciles. Y yo creo que esto es muy buena ayuda lo que nos están dando con esto.
Es una gran ayuda, que la verdad no lo esperábamos, pero sí, esto es bueno. Ojalá y así sigamos y que pronto se acabe lo de la pandemia. Muchas gracias.
You can go to lafoodbank.org if you're looking to help. You can also look at lafoodbank.org for ways to donate and also ways to find food near you via our pantry locator. There's no eligibility requirements, so just all you have to do is drive in your car and we'll load you up.
City Attorney Mike Fewer responds to a gun violence surge. A name is selected for the LA Zoo Condor fundraiser, and the Coronavirus Memorial Art Commissions are looking for submissions. These stories and more up next on City Beat.
In response to a surge in gun homicides, City Attorney Mike Fewer announced that his office has filed a nuisance abatement lawsuit against the owners of a volatile South Los Angeles apartment complex. As the site of an alleged homicide, arrests for gun assaults, as well as gun and drug sales, the lawsuit seeks to have the apartment building declared a public nuisance, demands a multitude of managerial and physical improvements, and seeks civil penalties and costs.
Every neighborhood in our city deserves to be safe, and we need collectively to be taking every form of action we can to assure that that's true.
The Greater Los Angeles Zoo Association has just announced that their Condor naming campaign has successfully raised over $31,000. The winning name of LA Zoo's new baby condor will be Cal for a male or Callie for a female. Support for the naming campaign came from all around the country and surpassed the target goal amount of $25,000. The Department of Cultural Affairs seeks to commission 200 artworks by no less than 200 lead artists who will receive seed funding of $600 each. The artists will get permission from family or friends to research the life of a person who has died from COVID-19. The artists will create a memorial, which may be songs, poems, paintings, mixed media collages, or any other type of artwork that can be revealed within a video or series of still images posted online for the general public. For more details, visit culturela.org and check under the Grants and Calls tab. Mayor Eric Garcetti has appointed the first ever Climate Emergency Mobilization Director. Veteran social impact strategist and environmental and health equity advocate Marta A. Segura will develop and oversee the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office and work closely with a newly established Climate Emergency Commission. Both the operations will be tackling the disproportionate health impacts of climate change on vulnerable frontline communities.
The beauty industry and barbershops have always been disseminators of information in the community. That's how Steve Ellis of Untouchable Academy sees it. And he's backing that belief up with a town hall to educate barbers and beauticians about the virus, how to stay safe, and how to get the word out to their clients.
The Academy and Maple are partnering to work with the beauty industry to get information out to the community regarding the COVID-19 virus. My thought has always been the beauty industry and the barbershops have always been disseminators of information in the community. So what would be a better thing to do than to educate those individuals, barbers and cosmetologists, about what the coronavirus is, what's going on with the vaccines, the shots, so they can in turn share that information with their clients.
We want to make sure that folks have the right information. Oftentimes you can see something in social media or something on the news or other places, and it may not necessarily make sense. So our goal is to provide education.
So you've got one barber in a shop who cuts 10 heads. Now he's educated 10 people. Those 10 people go home, talk to their families, and that word starts to spread very fast throughout the community. And I think the beauty and barber industry is very poised to do that.
Entonces, la cosa con ese virus de corona es que siempre cambia. Eso es lo que ya sabemos. Hay más que 100 tipos o variantes de ese virus. Entonces, es posible que como el gripe vamos a tener que tener otras vacunas en el futuro.
In a non-COVID season, the Economic and Workforce Development Department would be busy offering training to low-skilled workers and getting others lined up with jobs on construction and infrastructure. But while we're in the throes of this pandemic, the city department has had to shift their focus in order to reach Angelenos still in need of those vital services. General Manager Carolyn Hall dropped by via Zoom to tell us more about how that shift is going.
EWDD is the department in the city that's tasked with developing and implementing programs and initiatives that yield thriving businesses, create job training opportunities, and supports the growth of living wage jobs for the residents of the city of Los Angeles. In a non-COVID year, our day-to-day functions include working on real estate development projects, working with our workforce development ecosystem to place individuals that have a high barrier to employment into living wage jobs. We also work on providing financial support to small businesses. And those are the primary functions of the department. During the pandemic, the city of Los Angeles is one of the first cities to recognize the impact, the negative impact to our small businesses. And the council offices, in collaboration with the mayor, use general fund dollars to put forward a loan program. We later, after the federal government provided the city with CARES Act funds, we moved the loans to grants to put out over $100 million in grants to small businesses and micro entrepreneurs, childcare providers, and street vendors. It's been really satisfying to provide that sort of support, and I know that all the staff at EWDD, despite the long hours and the weekends that they put in to make sure that these programs were up and running, we felt that it was important work that we were doing to ensure that there was a safety net for people. If you go to our website is ewddlacity.com, you will find a list of the work source centers. Call them and they would provide the assistance to individuals who need help with putting together the resumes, interview skills, and any other skill sets that are needed in order to go out and look for and find a job.
Through the pandemic, the Los Angeles Public Library has proven to be an asset that reaches well beyond the circulation of books and physical media. In case you didn't know, here is another free virtual service they offer, the Distance Learning Program.
The Los Angeles Public Library has many distance services to help students. We have many student zones throughout the city when we were meeting in person, and now the student zone has become a virtual resources for the library and the communities. These student zones provide service to the general community, K to 12 students, so that they can sign up for a student zone helpers to assist them with their homework assignments. We see that as a big plus having it in a virtual environment, because we see a bigger audience that we can cover multiple communities, more vast areas. We usually conduct a survey after each sessions, so we can see how the session goes, and sometimes we do drop into some of the sessions to see how the students were doing with the student zone helpers. So we see that as a big benefit to the students, and also we see some of the parents who are booking those assignments ahead of time to have a connection with the students who help work on their homework assignments.
For most Angelenos, 2020 was a year unlike any other in our lifetime with a pandemic. We also mourned the loss of a beloved sports icon, witnessed waves of social unrest across the nation, and elected the first female person of color to the vice presidency. In an effort to memorialize the events of 2020, Councilmember John Lee is calling for items to include in District 12's 2020 time capsule. He spoke with us recently to explain the importance of preserving those moments.
mysterious pneumonia outbreak in Wuhan, China.
A new type of coronavirus.
The number of affected countries has tripled.
The World Health Organization has just declared that this is a pandemic.
It goes without saying that 2020 is a year like no other. I think we all have our unique experiences, some shared experiences, but really we wanted to sort of, capture this moment in time. It'll be interesting for this community to see in 10 years just how much the community has changed, the different things and the way the community has come together. We want pictures, we want stories, we want poems. Everyone had different experiences. Pictures I think really describe it, but we also want people to do written word. Obviously we can't include everything, but we want people to suggest anything that they think really sums up what 2020 means to them. It will be obviously in Council District 12, but it will be a city facility that we bury this in. You just go to cd12.org. February 28th is actually the last day for you to be able to submit something. I know everyone has unique experiences, both good and bad, but I think it's important for us to, always look back on time.
Our feature story this week highlights the Antaeus Theater Company. With COVID-19 putting the kibosh on live performances, the survival of smaller theater troupes looks dubious at best. But this theater company decided they would go really old school, and with surprisingly successful results. Check this segment on The Zip Code Plays.
Antaeus is a cooperative theater ensemble dedicated to bringing classical theater to Los Angeles, like our current production of You Can't Take It With You. I'll check this out.
Oh, and what happened when I turned around?
Since COVID happened, we thought, where are we going to be able to tell our stories? Is there anything we can do? Is there anything we can do for us? Is there anything we could do for Los Angeles? Is there anything we could do for people who desperately need art and storytelling?
We began to look at alternate forms of storytelling, and we thought about podcasts and audio plays and a long history of audio dramas.
Once we went into lockdown, the company called me and said, we have this crazy idea. We want to do radio plays.
I feel like the intimacy of listening to a podcast, listening to a story being told by actors in your ear, mimicked very much the intimate quality of our space. We only have 80 seats, and so you feel like you're right with the actors and they're telling you a story, and we thought that this format might suit us.
And Bill remembered that the first time we had a chance for our Playwrights Lab to share their work, and they did a festival of 2 nights of readings of 10-minute plays called the Zip Code Plays. And Bill said, well, why don't we go back to that?
We asked writers to choose a zip code in Los Angeles that spoke to them for whatever reason. We chose those. They wrote original material for us. We cast actors from within our company. And the plays are like, each one's like a little bonbon that has its own delicious taste, but each one's unique.
My hands, they feel. And I thought statues only came to life in operas and children's books. Their clothing is so odd and scant. I am most assuredly the only woman wearing a petticoat.
We also have some additional programming around these. We have some tours, and on our website you can either listen to the tours virtually, or when we're allowed to go outside a little bit more, you can take them in person, whether on foot or in your car.
The power of radio, the power of this medium, of just being able to hear a performance and be able to engage sort of on a different level, where you, the listener, are creating all of that imagery yourself. And I'm really proud to be able to take part in this series and continue that preservation of sort of radio theater.
And at a time when you can't travel, it's so exciting because people all over the world can come for a visit virtually to Los Angeles.
In doing classical theater in Los Angeles, sometimes doesn't allow us to explore our own communities as much as we might like. And concentrating on zip codes and this city and where we live and the communities in which we are all participating was something that's very important to us.
The face of a Kodiak bear and the dimensions of a Tyrannosaurus. And yes, definitely hungry.
So they're available on our website. That's antaeus.org, ANTAEUS, They're also available on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. They're free. Each one is only a half hour long, so you can listen to them in one little sitting.
I have never considered myself to be above sin. Indeed, I flogged myself with chains and metal whips. I could show you. And I'm more than willing to undergo more.
Learn about textiles with the Center for the Arts Eagle Rock. Tune in to discover your hidden superpower, or try your luck at the Banning House Virtual Escape Room. All this up next on Virtual Things to Do.
Center for the Arts Eagle Rock wants to teach you the medieval Japanese stitching technique called boro. In their latest workshop, Textile Arts Mindful Mending, Connie Roman will offer a 4-part online class that will teach you to mend, darn, and repurpose clothing. The class is open to anyone 16 years or older. Check out Textile Arts Mindful Mending. The first class starts Sunday, February 7th at 1:30 p.m. For information on how to register for the class, visit cfaer.org. The LA Public Library invites you to log on for a conversation with Emmy winner and Good Morning America weekend anchor Adrienne Bankert. Bankert will sign on with the Central Library to talk about her new book, Your Hidden Superpower. The book examines the profound and positive impact of simple acts of kindness. Your Hidden Superpower, a conversation with Adrienne Bankert, will stream live on both Facebook Live and YouTube Live, Thursday, February 4th at 5:30 p.m. For more information, visit lapl.org. Your friends at the Port of Los Angeles invite you to take a virtual trip back to 1880. The Banning Museum's virtual field trips currently brings you the interactive digital escape room. Learn all about Phineas Banning, the father of the Los Angeles Harbor, as you gather clues throughout the tour, clues that will hopefully get you back to the 21st century. Try your luck at 18th century sleuthing as you check out the Banning Museum Digital Escape Room. You can get started on your virtual adventure by following the tour link at thebanningmuseum.org. And that's a look at some virtual things to do.
That's it for this edition. I'm Natalia Bilbao. From all of us here at LA This Week, thank you so much for joining us. A reminder that you can catch us online at lacitywiew.org. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. See you next time for more LA This Week.
Hola angelinos, su departamento de bomberos de Los Ángeles de confianza y yo queremos tomarnos el tiempo de compartir con ustedes algunos consejos fáciles sobre el uso seguro de extintores de incendios. Una herramienta muy útil cuando se trata de apagar pequeños incendios. Para eso hoy contamos con la presencia de dos bomberos, Kurt y Joe, que nos van a enseñar los pasos básicos de PASS, Pull, Aim, Squeeze and Sweep. Así que recuerden, angelinos, los incendios pequeños se propagan rápidamente. Cuando se trata de fuego, sean inteligentes. No se pongan en riesgo por tratar de apagar un incendio grande. A diferencia de ustedes, las posesiones se pueden reemplazar. Y el mejor momento para aprender a utilizar un extintor de incendios no es cuando descubren un incendio. Así que recuerden y practiquen PASS. Tirar, apuntar, apretar y barrer.
Good morning and welcome to the Los Angeles City Council. Today is Wednesday, February 3rd. I'm Nuri Martinez, the President of the City Council. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Blumenfield.
Blumenfield present.
Bonin.
Bonin present.
Buscaino.
Here.
Cedillo.
Cedillo here.
De Leon.
You know you have me on this short screen. Do you see this?
Councilmember De Leon.
Oh, let me take it off. That's my testing. That's why I was testing. Sorry. Forgot to take it off.
Here. Thank you. Harris Dawson.
Present.
Koretz.
Present.
Krikorian.
Here.
Lee.
Present.
Martinez.
Present.
O'Farrell.
Present.
Price.
Present.
Rahman.
Present.
Ridley Thomas. Councilmember Ridley Thomas.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
15 members and a quorum, Madam President.
Okay, first order of business.
Approval of the minutes of February 2nd.
Mr. O'Farrell moves and Mr. Krikorian seconds next.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Bonin moves and Mr. Price seconds next.
Madam President, would council like all items to go forthwith today?
Without objection, that will be the order. Next.
Items 1 through 29 are items for which a public hearing has been held. A corrected committee report for item 26 has been posted, council file number 21452. Items 30 through 33 are items for which public hearings have not been held. Item 30 should be held on the desk as a discussion item. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay, members, those items are now before us. Do you wish to call any of these items special? Seeing none. Okay, Madam Clerk, can you go ahead and indicate what items we're prepared to vote on?
Thank you, Madam President. At this time, council may vote on items 1 through 29.
Okay, let's go ahead and open the roll on those items. Please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo.
Aye.
De Leon.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Rahman.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
15 ayes, these items are approved.
Okay, Madam Clerk, let's go ahead and move on to public comment.
Thank you, Madam President. And as indicated on the agenda, members of the public wishing to offer public comment should call 669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-535-8466 and press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak. Finally, when you hear the last 4 digits of your phone number, press star 6. And again, call 669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 160-535-8466 and press pound. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted into the meeting, press star 9 to request to speak. And finally, when you hear the last 4 digits of your phone number, press star 6.
To members of the public calling in, when it's your turn to speak, please state which of the agenda items you'd like to speak on. You have 1 minute per item to speak, up to 3 minutes total, and if you wish, 1 minute for general public comment. Please speak on the item first before providing general public comment. We'll tell you when your time is up. When speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic. Our goal is to get through as many speakers as we can. If you are not speaking on topic, or if we can't tell whether you're speaking on topic, you'll get one brief warning from me or the president. If you do not immediately get clearly on topic or against or off topic, the president will cut you off and you'll forfeit the rest of your speaking time and we'll move on to the next speaker. We will take 30 minutes total of public comment. The items that are open for public comment are items 30 through 33 only. Finally, for members of the public calling in to speak, as soon as you hear someone address you, you're live at the council meeting. If you're also listening to the council meeting on your computer, channel 35, or other device, please turn down the volume on those devices immediately. Also, if you're listening on another device, please keep one ear to the phone because there's both going to be feedback and there's a time delay between the live meeting and the broadcast. So if we read off the last 4 digits of your phone number or other identifying information if you're calling in with a blocked number, we want you to hear that immediately so that you can press *6 to unmute yourself. Otherwise, because of the time delay, we may not realize you're still on the line. Thank you, Madam President. We are ready for public comment.
Let's go ahead and take the first speaker.
Caller with a phone number ending in 4024, please press *6.
Good morning, Mommy. You need to apologize to Lynn Moses.
Which items do you
for
want
your
to speak on,
temporary
Speaker?
restraining order. Now let me go to items. Is it 1 through 29 as I heard?
Mr. Speaker, the only items open for public comment are 30 through 33. What do you want to speak on?
Is that agenda item 30 plus and only 33 in public comment?
That's right. What would you like to speak on?
Well, I'm going to go directly to my public comment to save time, asshole.
Okay, you have 1 minute for general public comment. Please go ahead.
You need to apologize to Lynn Moses, you bitches. You fucking Mike Fiore, you racist son of a bitch. You discriminate against the grounds of disability with your slap and your fake bullshit attorney. You, Mike Fiore, equal access to meetings. It is illegal to refuse Lynn Moses and Miss Autry an apology, you son of a bitch. And what about the fool up there? I pledged allegiance, you stupid fool like Jose Luis Weezer, criminal corruption. No place like home, you son of a bitch. State law, housing discrimination, chapter 2, you son of a bitch. Code 12927, SUPD, dick face. Now you know why people are upset in the public. You racist, chongo thugs, all of you are thugs, criminals, stop corruption.
Thank you, Speaker. Ready for the next speaker?
Caller with a phone number ending in 7186, please press *6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Yes, my name is Alex, and I'm going to be speaking on agenda item 30 as well as general public comment.
Sure. You have 1 minute for each. Please begin.
Thank you. Council members, this morning I am so angry that I am sick to my stomach, not only because LAPD once again brutalized peaceful BLM protesters yesterday and took a 2-month-old baby from its unhoused mother, but because yesterday Paul Krikorian said that what the city council does has no effect on COVID in Los Angeles. I had to look up words in the dictionary to find all the ways I felt about that statement. It is horrific, it is repugnant, it is vile, shameful, and revolting that is your opinion on how your job is. We are at the epicenter of a housing crisis, and 1 in 4 unhoused people are dying a day from COVID. You need to act on this now. It is getting worse and worse by the day. You tell yourself to sleep at night? Do you tell yourself that what you do has no effect on COVID in this city or homelessness in this city so that you can sleep at night? It's disgusting. This is all on you. At least Nithya and Bonin, thank you for actually putting forth legislation to try and fix these problems, but you need to act. You have the funding. You can commandeer hotels now. You can get 100% reimbursed by FEMA. I can't. This is disgusting. I'm moving on to general public comment. I once again, after watching LAPD beat peaceful protesters outside of the mayor's house, they once again attacked and arrested peaceful BLM demonstrators outside of the Stanley Moss courthouse. They only took the word of a person who came to agitate the crowd and arrested people who weren't even involved. And investigated no witnesses. LAPD continues to be an unchecked power that brutalizes its citizens and refuses to follow the law. They haven't changed since 1992 or 1965. I ask that this council actually do something, but since some of you actually take money from LAPPL, I doubt that's even going to happen. I wonder what it's like to ignore a decades-long civil rights battle happening in your backyard. And now the mayor wants to give money back to the police, even though they had a $130 million surplus this year, and that money in FEMA can go to help the fucking community. The only financial aid I've gotten in 11 months from Los Angeles was from LAWP, from the water and power people. Also, LAPD for some reason is going around on...
Next speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 3843, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hello, Andrea Jimenez, general public comment with regards to item 30.
Sure. You have 1 minute. Please begin.
Thank you. Good morning, Councilman Zedillo. 3 weeks ago, I spoke before you. I talked about how the eviction moratorium and the inability to do no-fault evictions was going to be the death of me and my family. I thank you for reaching out that same day, but I haven't heard back from you since. In the meantime, time is passing by. My child and I are still homeless during a pandemic, and my disabled husband's PTSD just keeps worsening. The LA City moratorium is too strict and will not allow relocations for tenants. The tenants will not be thrown out in the streets without any kind of assistance. The city will require relocation fees that we must pay to help the tenants. So why can we not relocate them? The city is opening, but we're still homeless. Under California state law, we are allowed to proceed with no-fault evictions, but the city of LA is keeping us homeless by not allowing no-fault evictions. I haven't been able to recover my house since March last year. So I ask you, how much longer will you keep me homeless? As I have been homeless for almost a year now. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker.
Next speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 1148, please press star 6. Caller with the phone number ending in 1148, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Len Moses, all available items and public comment, please.
Sure, Mr. Moses. So you have 3 minutes for items 30 through 33, followed by 1 minute for general public comment. Please begin.
Okay, thank you. Apologize to Ms. Autry for your disrespect to her. Martinez, City Attorney, it's the law that you wear your mask at all times, even when you're speaking, at the council meetings included, sir. Obey the law, City Attorney. Thank you.
Please get on your public comment.
Yes, no, I will continue on my items. Item number 3, item number 31. No dollar amount is listed. Why? This is not being forthright to the public. This is like item 31 yesterday, where you changed the motion, you put in there, you changed the motion orally out of the public site. Of course, that's corrupt Dawson. And it's just like item number 30 yesterday, where you take money from the city, the neighborhood council, that's Ridley Uncle Thomas, for his personal district account. Item number 33, 32, motion of price to the $50,000 reward for a shooting death. We can use that money. You can probably do $7,500 tiny homes instead of the $130,000 the sleazy council is trying to siphon off of the public. Use this money, this reward money, and put up a reward for.
Are you there, Speaker?
Where they relocate as a relocation firm, siphoning money off of everybody that's evicted. Yeah, current price makes money off of everybody that's evicted. So let's take that $50,000 and put up a reward for current price to go to jail. or
So could we get
to
back
house him in a jail for this type of corruption.
We've got pretty far
Imagine-
off the agenda item, Speaker. Let's get back on them or go to general public comment, please.
Yes, sir. You're right. I strayed a little bit. But you obey the rules too, okay? $1,570,000, item number 33. Here's another. Look at the wording. Address unforeseen site conditions. What the hell is that? That means you put the money in the LA City Councilman's pocket. That's what that means. I'm going to go to my general public comment, please.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Bonin, Ms. Rahman, it's not just the room key, Project Room Key and commandeering hotels. You know that you put up a motion, Mr. Bonin, that would tax deliberately kept units kept off the market, which there is a glut. There is no shortage of housing. This council voted it down or watered it down, so you had to remove it. Please reintroduce the motion as soon as possible. And let's see if these corrupt devils vote it down again. Now, Ridley Uncle Thomas has destroyed over 250, almost 300 black-owned businesses by his putting that metro above ground. They evict all these people, and that's how Price, Wesson, and Dawson.
Thank you, Speaker.
Next speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 5137, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Good Wednesday morning, City Council. My name is Jamie Penn. I'm the socialist who's the Subdistrict 3 representative for Wilshire Center Koreatown Neighborhood Council. My pronouns are she, her, and I'd like to speak on item number 30 in general public comment.
Of course, please go ahead. You have 1 minute for each.
Thank you. First, I'd really like clarification from the city attorney on quorum. Often, many of you are seemingly on the phone, constantly speaking to folks off camera. I don't understand how this satisfies the Brown Act as far as attendance, and I do believe the people of Los Angeles deserve clarification on this. I'd like to start speaking on item 30, which is an oral report about just more money from Prop HHH. This is something we've been calling for over a year. I really hope that we can get this report through, get this money spent. We really have a huge need to get more energy into Project Room Key. That program never really took off, in my own personal opinion, and it's so desperately needed. And I thank Council Members Bonin and Rahman for getting that put forward. It's honestly just the best direction we're headed right now, in my own opinion. And I'd like to give general public comment. We've been calling for over a year. I myself have been participating in general public comment for over a year now, and we've been calling for the same thing. We really need relief. The people are struggling. There is a huge event on the horizon regarding evictions. That's the elephant in the room. Whether anyone wants to address it or not, that's coming. And we need something done. As everyone is explaining, not enough relief is being provided. That's really what needs to be done. We need to come up with a plan. Even the people who are fighting for us are being targeted. Yesterday, members of BLM were targeted. I've seen the video footage, and I feel comfortable saying that after my own personal experience, because the video count was all too familiar with what I myself have experienced. So I want to finish with two clear requests. Please seize the hotels as soon as possible. And two, please protect the people that are fighting for us. They need you to protect them.
Next speaker.
Caller with a phone number ending in 0899, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
My name is Stacy Dawson Stearns. I'd like to speak on item 30 in general public comment, please.
You have 1 minute for each. Please begin.
Okay. So on item 30, this oral report, I'm just wondering if this oral report is going to discuss the fact that Joey Bucket's continued sweeps in CD15. Yesterday he swept people who had signs on their tents saying, "We have COVID symptoms. Please do not cause us to be moved." Not only that, but the tents that these sweeps are throwing into the garbage are actually tents that were purchased and given to these people by LASA. So if this isn't a metaphor for how this council and this city deals with money and funding that's supposed to be put toward the housing crisis, it's literally like a Hieronymus Bosch painting where you're like vomiting money and shoving it up your own ass, and it's ridiculous. Okay, I want to move on to my general public comment. When I look at this council, I see a bunch of people jockeying for positions. Most of you are going to be running campaigns in 22. So I dare you, put your money where your mouth is. Show us where you stand. And it's time to stand up to the LAPD. I want to know who on this council is going to join Bonin in calling out the LAPPL, and if you all are going to join together and step up to LAPD. On Tuesday, BLMLA and allies rallied for progressive justice reform, calling out police associations for corruption, and as they left, they were trailed and surrounded by LAPD. 3 people were detained. It was a targeted attack. Now, today in The Guardian, there's an article about the Dodger Stadium situation, and it actually talks about California State Senator Pan and how he has been the victim of attacks from anti-vaxxers for quite a while, and he connects the anti-vaxxer and anti-mask movement to its actual relationship with extremists and right-wing militias connected to the failed coup at the Capitol. So when our officers here in the LAPD actually create protest zones for anti-vaxxers, we see where.
Next speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 8901, please press *6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Good morning, council members. My name is Matthew Brush. I'd like to speak on item 30 and the general public comment, please.
You have 1 minute for each. Please begin.
Thank you. I am a current public health investigator for the County of Los Angeles Department of Public Health, and I'm currently very concerned with the way that the county is handling COVID in this area. We have seen not only violations among our law enforcement officers who refuse to wear masks and openly infect the public via not wearing appropriate PPE, but we also see members of our courthouses being forced to go to work. We have translators who are visiting offices that have active COVID infections, people being brought in for misdemeanors, parking tickets. In public health, we call this a downstream approach. We are trying to pull people who are drowning out of a river that has a bridge upstream that could be fixed, but is continued to be ignored. We need to both commandeer the hotels and stop all this bullshit of giving parking tickets in a pandemic, literally leaving horse shit in our neighborhoods. We need to make sure that we can vaccinate people, and we need to ensure that our vaccination sites and healthcare workers are protected while they are at work. We need to ensure that people are provided education so that they trust our public health system and that we can combat scientific misinformation. And along with that is LAPD having its unchecked power checked and having our local tenants being assisted in paying their rent. There is absolute value in commandeering the hotels, which we have been telling you to do for months, but we've also been saying that people need help paying their rent for months, and you won't have to help people who are unhoused if you keep people in their homes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Speaker.
Next speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 5245, please press *6. Caller with the phone number ending in 5245, please press *6. Caller with the phone number ending in 7543, please press *6.
Hello?
Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, good morning. I'm a constituent of City 6. I'm allowed to make a comment on item 30 in general comments.
Sure, you have 1 minute for each. Please begin.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm calling because I've been watching Frontline by PBS on housing, affordable housing, and we have to find a way to lower the cost of housing for the unhoused residents of Los Angeles, because some land developers, they overcharge way too much, and I believe Ron Galperin, the city controller, did made a issue about this, how the cost of housing is so expensive. We have to keep it down so we can house as many people as possible. And moving on to general comment. My general comment, I would like to say that we could help the homeless population by providing recycling bins and trash bins so they could throw their trash in recyclables, so the city doesn't have to force them to move to a different location. So we could find common ground between the people on the left and the city, because if we keep fighting over the same issues, nothing's going to get solved. And I'm a problem solver. I like to compromise. We are a nation of compromise since the founding of this nation. Now, I'm a very civil person. I don't like using profanity like some other callers. I'm not like that. I'm different from them. I like to negotiate and work on solutions. And I look forward to resolving this crisis that we are experiencing, including the San Fernando Valley, because I'm a Valley resident, so I care about where I live also. And
thank you, Speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 3137, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Vishal Singh. I'd like to speak on item 30 and do general public comment.
You have 1 minute for each. Please begin.
So if we're talking about making a report on the unhoused crisis, for which the city is an epicenter for this, as well as COVID-19, we need to talk about the eviction crisis as well. Now, I've actually been on the scene for several what I would characterize as illegal evictions during the moratorium that are enforced by LA law enforcement. You see, this city is actively inflaming the unhoused epidemic by forcing people into the streets and out of their homes when they cannot pay for everything due to the COVID-19 pandemic affecting their work. This, combined with the unhoused sweeps from LAPD, shows the city is actively trying to wipe out unhoused issues by wiping out unhoused people. I have seen the leaked video of Mayor Garcetti comparing unhoused people to horse excrement. This shows a dehumanization from you, city officials, that is resulting in actual deaths. Over 3 unhoused people die per day in our county, and our mayor thinks they have the worth of horse excrement. That is horrific. It's time that the council and the city acknowledges that the unhoused people are human beings. Seize the hotel now. Prove it. Prove that you actually think they are human beings.
Thank you, Speaker.
Next speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 4615, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Good morning. This is Coco Dodson, and I am calling on item 30 and public comment as well.
You have 1 minute for each. Please begin.
I have been witnessing this crisis, and it's devastating to see that you guys do nothing and further perpetuate the unhoused neighbor crisis that we are taking care of for you guys. You criminalize them. You lock them up. Is it any wonder that we are the largest prison population in the world? I don't see you guys helping the situation. I see you turning more people into slaves by putting them in for-profit prisons and cleaning up the streets. That's not cleaning up the streets. You're getting rid of humans who have jobs. I know many, many, many unhoused neighbors with jobs. And then you take their tent. They have to rebuy that tent. How are they supposed to ever rebuild their lives when you destroy it repeatedly? And that is on top of all the other fears that they have to survive in their tents. Where is your assistance? Seize the hotel. Take care of it and stop feeding into this corruption.
Thank you, Speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 5318, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
My name is Gina Viola, and I'd like to speak on items 30, 32, and general public comment, please.
So you have 2 minutes for the items, followed by 1 minute for general public comment. Please begin.
Thank you. So as far as the Triple H audit that's coming, I know that bridge homes have been put up, as quickly as possible because you need to spend that money. When are we going to commandeer the hotels? FEMA has given you the green light, and clearly you have lots and lots of loss of staffing. I was in the Homelessness and Poverty Committee meeting last week where I heard the entire presentation. So there should be ample staff for you to commandeer these hotels and turn this into a temporary situation while we eventually move towards social housing in this city. I was at a sweep this morning. That is a useless waste of money. A shower tent was positioned blocks away from where people are living because Mitch O'Farrell successfully displaced at least a dozen people who were living on DeLongpre for many, many months. So congratulations, Mitch. You managed to get rid of those folks, even though we have been fighting to get you to adhere to CDC guidelines and not displace people. Item 32, the LAPD needs city funds to solve crime. They don't prevent crime. They can't even solve crime without incentives, financial incentives from the city. When are we going to talk about the LAPD? Yesterday was a brazen example of the difference in how the LAPD, that was a BLM press conference. It wasn't even a protest. It was a press conference. And 3 people end up arrested. You have people up at Dodger Stadium unmasked, harassing people in their cars, and they get handled with...
Would you get back on the agenda item? This seems quite unrelated to the reward
for
motion.
future protests. I'm sorry?
This seems quite unrelated to the reward motion. Would you please get back on item 32 or go to general public comment?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll switch to general public comment. So the LAPD operates in this town with absolutely zero accountability. The supposed board of police commissioners is mayor appointed, and each one of them has a direct conflict of interest being there. I don't know about the newest member, but the second to newest member, Lou Calanche, has received funding for her organization for the GRID program. So there is a direct conflict of interest there. How can she be oversight for the police when she is actually working with the police? She is a vendor of the police. This is just out of control, rampantly out of control. And all you want to do is keep throwing money at the LAPD when they continue to brutalize Black, brown, and poor people in this city on the regular. And not only that, they have double the rate of COVID as the rest of the city does. 21% of the LAPD is infected with COVID because they haven't bothered to wear a mask and they haven't believed in it. And now you actually have them helping orchestrate vaccines for something.
Next speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 0322, please press *6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
This is Michelle King. I'd like to speak on items 30, 32 in public comment, please.
I think you said 30 in general public comment. If so, it's 1 minute each. Please begin.
First, stop criminalizing homelessness. When are we going to use our resources to support our neighbors rather than punish them? The money is there. We have a bloated budget. Use it to help people. Next, yesterday, LAPD targeted a small group leaving the Gascon rally. That group included a community elder. This is how we treat our citizens. This is how we treat our elders for walking to their cars. It's not surprising, but it's embarrassing because that's all that LAPD knows how to do. They're obviously scared they're losing reign over the city. So they're lashing out the only way they know how, with violence to try to intimidate our neighbors into submission. To remind them who runs this city, LAPD has the coping skills of a petulant toddler. Why are LAPD and LASD so threatened by the new DA's agenda to promote public safety? Because law enforcement isn't interested in public safety in this city. All they care about is power and control. When someone's in need, when we see someone in danger, we help them. When we attempted to de-escalate the situation and protect those community members, we were met with batons, and the bike cops even used their bikes to hit us for helping a neighbor in need. The amount of squad cars that rolled up that they called in, decked out in riot gear with rubber bullets at the ready, for what? This is a waste of our taxpayer money. I am not paying for LAPD to terrorize my neighbors and then drive away laughing, waving, and mocking community members because they think they're untouchable. All the while not wearing masks amid a worldwide pandemic when we have been required to wear masks by Eric Garcetti since April 10th of last year. LAP is out of control, and we need to act now to create public safety for all of our citizens.
Next speaker.
Caller with the phone number ending in 6101, please press star 6. Caller with the phone number ending in 6101, please press star 6. Caller with the phone number ending in 6103, please press star 6. Please state your name and the item you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Duwap Ashi, and I'd like to speak on item 30.
Sure.
And I'd like to make a public statement.
So you have 1 minute for the item and then 1 minute for general public comment. Please begin.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a severe situation in this city with the unhoused, and the fact that we have so many quote unquote leaders like our mayor who has done nothing to help support them. He has left it to us people who are compassionate and have empathy to help these unhoused citizens who are treated as if they are not citizens at all. Many of these people who are getting evictions are on the verge of being unhoused as well in a city where our mayor literally compares them to horse shit. But what he forgot to mention is that is his policy, is horse shit. The fact that people are suffering and dying in the streets at an alarming rate, and it seems like no one wants to do anything about it, is a problem. Our mayor is a self-righteous piece of shit who literally only cares about himself. And now that he's not going to be sitting with Joe Biden in the White House, he forgot he had a lot of messes to clean up. My public statement: the LAPD is completely and utterly disgusting and out of control. The fact that they showed up in riot gear yesterday at a BLM event to arrest people who were trying to keep other people safe is completely disgusting when you think that less than a week ago, anti-vaxxers were shutting down the Dodger Stadium with people who wanted to get a vaccine. And the LAPD agreed to allow them to protest, and they're going to designate an area. These are also the same people who have been attacking and brutalizing Black and brown folks for almost 4 years under the name of white supremacy, which is our bigger pandemic. So we have a big fucking problem in this city, and if it doesn't get sorted out, there's going to be even more issues. The LAPD must be defunded and must be abolished immediately. Thank you.
Okay, members, that concludes public comment for today's meeting. Madam Clerk, let's go ahead and vote on the following items. Let's vote on items 31 through 33. Please call the roll.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Bonin.
Bonin, aye.
Buscaino.
Aye.
Cedillo.
Cedillo, aye.
De Leon.
Aye.
Harris Dawson.
Yes.
Koretz.
Aye.
Krikorian.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
O'Farrell.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Rahman.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
15 ayes. These items are approved. Adopted.
All right, thank you. Members, we're going to move on to item number 3 that was scheduled for discussion this morning. I'm waiting to see if we're going to have our speakers come in virtually so we can let them into our meeting. But members, today we have the CAO and HSID here to provide us with an update on our homeless roadmap, our interim housing, our permanent supportive housing, and Prop HHH. This is one of the first of a series of discussions we'll be having this year regarding homelessness. So today's discussion will be a general discussion on housing, and we'll also provide members with an update on the city's building process of our both interim and permanent housing, along with efforts of many of our individual offices as we continue to build. We'll continue to have more in-depth policy discussions in council and in committee as well, especially in homelessness and poverty. That's being chaired by Council Member Mark Whitley Thomas. So today's discussion is going to be, it's only going to be intended to address, isn't going to address any particular motion, but it will give you an opportunity to get a status report about where we're at and ask questions of the two departments. So if we can have the CAO's office, Yolanda Chavez, is she with us? And Meg Barkley from the CAO's office. Just waiting to see if we can connect with them. Oh, I apologize. I was under the impression they were going to join us virtually. I guess they're coming down. They're making their way down the hall. They're going to be in council chambers, so we'll wait for them to come inside the room. We also have Ann Swell, who's our general manager for HSID, that's in our meeting. I believe she is joining us virtually. She'll give us a status report on Prop HHH and where we're at with building permanent supportive housing in our city. Ann, can you hear me? There you are.
I can, thank you.
All right, thank you for joining us. We're just waiting for Yolanda and Meg to make their way inside council chambers so that we can begin with their presentation. Then you can go ahead and follow their presentation, Ann. And then we're going to go ahead and open it to questions from the members for both departments after you've both spoken.
Thank you.
Good morning, ladies. You want to go ahead and take a seat? So I just mentioned to our members that today's discussion is not intended to address one particular motion, but rather provide an opportunity for our members to get a status update and ask any questions. So would you like to go first?
Sure.
Are we starting with Ms. Chavez?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Good morning.
Good morning, Yolanda Chavez with the CEO's office.
Can you bring your microphone a little bit closer to?
Good morning, Yolanda Chavez with the CEO's office. I'm joined today by our city homeless coordinator, Meg Barkley, and we're going to be providing a brief update on the city's investment in interim housing and a status on the homelessness roadmap. So let me start by stating that sometime around fiscal year 2007, 2008, the federal government decided through its Continuum of Care, NOFA, that they would no longer be funding the construction of new shelters. And that's actually one of the reasons why we don't see an increase in capacity in terms of new shelter beds until the mayor launched a Bridge Home program in 2018. And we launched the program concurrently with the implementation of Prop HHH. As you may remember, Prop HHH was approved in November of 2016. We issued the first bonds in 2017, actually immediately following November that summer. And it became very clear that while these permanent units were being developed, that we needed an interim solution. And so a Bridge Home was launched with the goal to establish one interim housing facility in each council district for a total of 1,500 beds. We, the city, and all of you, of course, have exceeded this goal. We have 28 facilities completed, and I should say that only 3 are pending completion. So 3 are in development. Once developed, this would be a total of 2,120 beds. A number of these are included in the roadmap, which Meg will review. In terms of our financial investment in the program, to date, we have invested $147 million in a Bridge Home program, $107 million in capital. And, you know, there's been a lot of discussion on the cost of these beds and these structures, especially the interim structures. But one of the ways that we calculate the cost, obviously interim housing is extremely different from permanent units. The resident does not live there permanently. The goal is for them to get services, stabilized, and be able to move to a more permanent solution. And so the way that we calculate the cost is on the fixed costs, the capital, is really about how many beds that, or how many people that bed is going to serve over the term of the facility. So if the facility is going to be there for 5 years, we calculated on assuming a turnover of twice a year. So the 2 people during one year will be served by that bed. So the cost for that bed over the 5 years in terms of just the fixed cost, the capital, is a little bit over $5,000. In terms of services, we've invested at this point $40 million. And I do want to say that as we calculate beds, even for the roadmap, we do try to account for both the cost of the fixed cost and the services over the term of the facility. So let me turn it now over to Meg, who will give you status on the homelessness roadmap.
Thanks. Again, Meg Barclay, I'm the City Homeless Coordinator in the CAO's office. As you all know, in June of 2020, the city and the county entered into a memorandum of understanding to establish 6,000 interventions, new homeless interventions, and we use that term because it applies to new units in permanent facilities, shelter beds, safe parking slots. So interventions is a more general term meant to apply to all different types of assistance. The agreement was to develop 6,700 interventions by December 16th of 2021, and they're broken down according to 700 interventions that were in council district plans that were developed to sort of flesh out this effort, that were also in existing agreements with the county. Those are to come online by April 16th of 2021, and an additional 5,300 other new interventions by April 16th of 2021, for a total of 6,000 by April 16th of 2021. I'm sorry, my glasses are fogging up. We're also, and then another additional 700 new interventions by December 16th of 2021, for a total of 6,700 interventions. The county's commitment under the MOU is to provide 50% of operating costs, or up to $293 million over 5 years. And also, the city's commitment is to pay any capital costs to establish these new interventions, and to pay 50% of operating costs up to $55 per bed per night, and 100% of the costs over that amount. And this, our obligation under the agreement is expected to be up to $300 million over the 5 years. So the current status of the roadmap, as of right now, 8,252 interventions are currently in progress. And this includes the 3,000 rapid rehousing or shared housing slots that have been funded with the Emergency Shelter or Solutions Grant, the COVID allocation. Right now, it includes 11 interim housing sites. Those are both permanent sites and tiny home villages, 18 Project Home Key properties with these 15 hotels or motels, and 3 commercial properties, and 12 safe parking sites. And 2,580 of these 8,252 interventions in process have been completed and are open and in operation as of February 1st, 2021.
So in terms of the investment we've made in the roadmap, I wanted to point out that most of the investment is one-time funding. So funding sources from the CARES Act and our state homeless grants, HEAP and HAP. And to date, $455 million have been allocated for this effort, We have committed or plan to commit in the next couple of weeks with projects that are still in the pipeline, $426 million. And we could definitely commit the entire $455 million, but at this point, just based on the projects in the pipeline, that's what we anticipate committing in the next couple of weeks. And again, stressing that this is one-time funding. What we try to do, given the city's financial situation, is to not impact the general fund until we absolutely have to. And so what we try to do, especially on the operation and services side, is to use, in particular, the ESG Emergency Solutions Grant that was part of the CARES Act to fund services through at least June 30th of 2022, so that hopefully the general fund will not be impacted until 22-23, till fiscal year 22-23. We are very concerned that if we do not continue to receive state homeless grants, that the impact to the general fund will definitely be a substantial impact of up to 66 to 100 million a year, just to continue the operations and services for all of these interventions. And with that, we're open to your questions.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to our General Manager, Ann Swell. Can you hear me, Ann? General Manager from HCID that's with us this morning. Thank you, Ann, for being here. Do you want to go ahead and go through your presentation before I take questions from our members? Go ahead.
I will. Thank you. Thank you, Council President. Thank you, council members, for this opportunity to come and talk to you this morning about Measure HHH. As I start, I'd like to take a second. Somewhere in your Zoom pictures is Daniel Wynn, who is on his 4th week as the Assistant General Manager of the Housing Development Bureau in the department. Some of you have met him, some of your staff have definitely met him, and he and his staff are responsible for the HHH pipeline and getting all these projects successfully through to completion. So as I was preparing for this, one of the council staff asked me what the city did about supportive housing production before HHH. And I thought a little context might be helpful, because although some of you were there before HHH, not all, and not all of us, were focusing on it at the time. So for 4 decades before HHH, as a result of the closure of the state mental hospitals and the failure to grow the supply of homes to keep up with our population and job growth, street homelessness and housing insecurity grew. We've all seen that. By 1987, supportive housing was being built in Los Angeles almost entirely with funding from the Community Redevelopment Agency, less so from the city. And the providers learned through trial and error what did and didn't work in terms of the size of projects, private or communal shared spaces, services on-site or nearby, relying on operating income such as Social Security instead of general relief. All sorts of lessons learned in a period of 2 decades of starting this permanent supportive housing movement. Studies in 2009 showed that well-operated supportive housing had a 92% success rate in keeping people housed and was significantly cheaper than providing police and emergency services to people on the street. And by then, the Community Redevelopment Agency was spending over $100 million a year in tax increment funding for supportive housing and affordable housing in Los Angeles. So when California ended redevelopment in 2012, the city had funding for only 300 units of supportive housing every year. In October 2015, as homelessness was expanding visibly across the city, the mayor, council, and advocates were working on a comprehensive homeless strategy in coordination with the county, which was doing its own. In February of 2016, when the city and the county approved their respective plans, the production of affordable or supportive housing was identified as a key need, but both deferred increasing production because there was no money. The city's plan proposed an initial 5 years of leasing supportive housing, although it acknowledged that the tight housing market made this an increasingly expensive solution with a plan to bring on newly constructed housing starting in year 5 in hopes that funds would be available then. The plan noted that the average subsidy amount was probably going to be $150,000 per unit and that it would be leveraged by other sources. And it also noted that housing production was slow and capital intensive, but had much lower operating costs and was more cost effective, as the initial investment of city funds would produce a 55-year asset dedicated to this affordable housing, supportive housing purpose. So shortly after these plans were adopted, advocates and city leaders began working on solving the "there is no money" problem, and did polling, did some planning with the city administrative officer, and came up with the idea that became HHH. The HHH bond measure was designed to increase the production of supportive housing for people experiencing homelessness from 300 units a year to 1,000 every year for 10 years. Funds were to be targeted to 3 groups: people experiencing homelessness, people experiencing chronic homelessness who've been on the streets for more than a year, and up to 20% of the funds could be spent for very low income residents at risk of homelessness. A portion of the funds were also set aside for facilities such as shelters, interim bridge housing, and showers. The measure passed overwhelmingly in November 2016. A Citizens Oversight Committee was set up, funding guidelines were approved by this council, and the first funds were awarded in March 2017. So we're now 4 years later. Where are we? As this slide shows, we have 124 HHH projects with 7,961 units in the pipeline. All of those projects have sites selected and under contract. They have plans and entitlements underway, and some of them have construction in progress. 7 of these, with 489 units, are completed and are occupied or have people moving in. 44 of them, with 2,779 units, are under construction. Another 16 are in line to close construction financing by this spring. Another 28 will be closing by the end of this calendar year, which leaves 29 projects that are still assembling their financing and are targeted to close very realistically by the end of 2022. In all, by the end of 2024, we will have completed more than 960 units over the initial goal of 7,000 units 2 years early. The average HHH subsidy will be only $135,000 per unit, and there are HHH projects in every council district. So as predicted in the city's 2016 plan, almost all of these projects use not only city HHH funds, they also use HACLA, or County Housing for Health rental vouchers, County Department of Health Services or Mental Health Department funding for the case management services, low-income housing tax credits, and at least one other funding source, such as the No Place Like Home Fund, supported by the Mental Health Services Act, or the Transit-Oriented Communities Funds, or multifamily housing programs of the state. Each of these requires its own application, and the process of securing and complying with the requirements adds costs and time to the process. We estimate that the additional cost may be as much as $50,000 to $80,000 per unit in extra time, carrying costs, legal costs, and requirements, but the net gain is about $210,000 a unit. So not only does this make the city's dollars go further and produce more homes here, but in truth, many of the requirements help make the developments more stable. For example, the tax credit program's requirements for higher energy efficiency adds slightly to construction costs, but reduces operating costs over the life of the project. Each HHH funded project is required to have adequate operating reserves and to pay prevailing wages for the construction work. Although many HHH projects are 100% supportive housing, with at least 25% for people experiencing chronic homelessness, others include units for very low or low income people at risk of homelessness, and others are more scattered site with mixed income, mixed use projects in buildings that have at least 20 supportive housing units to facilitate adequate services staffing within the building. In addition to the HHH funded units, the city continues to fund those 300 units per year in supportive housing as part of our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is made up of federal home trust dollars, our linkage fee that was adopted in 2017, and now SB2 fees from the state's program. We've also been fortunate to have the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles add 260 supportive housing units to their portfolio this year through the Project Home Key program that Meg and Yolanda talked about, purchasing newly completed but never occupied apartment buildings and hotels that were in good shape. So besides the HHH capital funds, what does it take to make the supportive housing feasible? At the same time that we were working to put HHH on the ballot, city leaders and advocates began working to streamline the production and entitlement process for affordable and supportive housing. The Mayor's Executive Directive 13 directed departments to identify ways to speed up the processing, and the Department of City Planning and HCID worked with developers to identify requirements that increased costs and created delays in supportive housing. This led to the adoption by the City Council of the Permanent Supportive Housing Zoning Ordinance in 2017, and to the passage by the state legislature of AB 1197, which provided all of the city's HHH-funded supportive housing and shelter projects, along with the zoning ordinance itself, a full exemption from CEQA. This assurance that projects will not be held up in legal disputes has allowed developers to fully utilize parking reductions, density increases, and other features that reduce costs in the past year. So despite this progress, there's always more that we can do to speed up processes, remove barriers, and make systems more transparent. This past week, I was pleased to join with my fellow general managers of the Department of City Planning and the Department of Building and Safety, as well as the Mayor's Housing Executive Officer, to meet with 15 developers ranging from supportive housing providers to market rate developers utilizing our transit-oriented communities program to start to identify both quick and high impact changes that could be made. And we will be bringing the results of this working group to the council and possibly the legislature in the next few months as the group progresses. So besides the improvements to zoning and planning approvals and building safety, our partners talked about the difficulties of going sequentially to get multiple funding sources from many agencies. One of the advantages that we saw with Project Home Key a few months ago was that things can move very quickly when we have one funding source that comes to the city. We've been working on a modest version of that with a universal application with the county and the state partners, but we are looking for additional alignment that can save time and money. In addition to these systems improvements, supportive housing needs rental subsidies, as the amount most tenants can afford to pay is several $100s per month below basic operating costs, and they need services dollars to provide the on-site case management services. We are fortunate to have partnerships with TACLA, the Housing Authority, and the county, but the ability to grow the inventory beyond our 10,000 units relies on continued or increased availability of vouchers from the federal government or the continued flexibility to use health and general funds from the county. Measure H, which expires in 5 years, is a key part of those case management dollars right now. So where do we go from here in terms of HHH? It's a question a number of us have been discussing in Citizens Oversight Committee and council committees and just in citizens groups. Currently, we have about 30 million in unallocated HHH funds and possibly another 20 to 30 million in funds that will be released from existing projects that have secured additional leverage funding that reduces their need for HHH. Staff is working on recommendations to bring to you, the mayor, and the Citizens Oversight Committee to allocate those funds for three things. Two small needs, first and second, are covering cost overruns due to unexpected conditions such as changes in DWP requirements on projects, or small investments to add HHH funding and CEQA exemptions to City Affordable Housing Trust Fund supportive housing projects. The bulk of the funds should be used to provide funds for possibly the additional Project Home Key allocation in the governor's budget, if that is approved, and for additional innovation projects. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about the progress in HHH, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Anne. Let me bring up my screen so I can tell which members to call on. Mr. Cedillo?
Yes, and thank you so much, As you know, and let me say publicly, we're so excited to have you at the helm of HCID. You have a rich history, long history in doing this work, and so we're very pleased and happy to have you. You mentioned a CEQA exemption. Could you tell us about to what extent CEQA has been abused, and it can maybe perhaps this may be a need for a report back, but the number of projects in which CEQA has been used to block developments of affordable housing and supportive housing. For example, the very first project I encountered in my district was 80 units on 3 parking lots, 100% affordable housing, done with incredible detail by Ed Reyes with his planning background. That was blocked by CEQA. There's a long list in my district of projects that are being blocked by CEQA, and the result is nothing gets developed. There's a project for new mothers in my district, 60 beds, 60 units. Another project blocked by CEQA. And there's a long list I could ask my staff to gather, and we can share it with you. But a long list of projects for which either unions, environmental activists, or conservancy activists are utilizing CEQA to block the development of affordable housing, mixed-use housing, and supportive housing. So talk to us about that. What was the intent and purpose of CEQA, and how this abuse is impacting our ability to house people in the city of Los Angeles?
So I do admit I go back a long way, but I don't actually, I don't feel that I can speak to the intent of CEQA originally, but we all know that it was not originally meant to block all housing projects. It was, for environmental protections, and really to give underserved communities a voice in development decisions. So, CEQA was one of those double-edged swords. It is certainly, you can point to almost any affordable housing project in the city, and whether it was actually sued about CEQA or just lawsuits were feared, CEQA looms over every project that has a government, discretionary decision on it. I've seen projects that ended up, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to adjoining property owners for somewhat bogus things in order to stave off, threatened CEQA lawsuits. So a couple of researchers from UC Berkeley a few years ago tried to say that there was no impact of CEQA on housing because so few lawsuits were filed. The problem is not really that lawsuits get filed, it's what happens when they are threatened. And the fact that so many developers make decisions to not utilize the tools that we've offered them, like the supportive housing zoning ordinance reduction in parking, because they fear triggering, a CEQA lawsuit. So to have AB 1197 provide a full exemption, not just trying to make things by right, but literally saying there is this thing called CEQA, and for the purposes of that thing, these projects do not exist, really provided a lot more security to the developers that are doing these projects. Assemblymember Miguel Santiago, who authored that bill, put forth another one last year in the pandemic year that would exempt all affordable housing projects around the state that required prevailing wage and had some labor protections. But in the pandemic, shaving off of projects, it did not go forward. But I know that he plans to put something like that forth again.
Thank you, Mr. Cedillo.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Blumenfield?
Great. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. And thank you, Madam President, for bringing this really important issue forward, because I think the more we talk about this, the more we can make breakthroughs. A couple of different questions. One about FEMA funding. I noticed when you were talking about the different funding in the roadmap, there wasn't any FEMA funding listed. And why is that not listed, and how can that affect us now, potentially with this 100% executive order? What does that mean? Can we actually use that money to buy hotels? And then I have a couple other questions too. Go ahead.
So FEMA is a reimbursement for upfront funding for COVID response. And so the reason we don't have it on this list is because we're using federal money for the most part to fund the roadmap. And FEMA will not reimburse CARES Act money since CARES Act money was actually approved as part of the COVID response. So if they were to reimburse us for the CARES Act money, they would basically be giving us double funding, right? If we were funding the roadmap, because we are, it's a response to COVID, and if we were using our own general fund dollars to build these pallet shelters, to provide these services, then we could make a case to FEMA to reimburse us for that. But because we're using CARES Act funding, we cannot get reimbursed. And FEMA does not reimburse for acquisition of long-term assets because FEMA is really responding to the crisis and the emergency. So at this point, we don't believe they would fund us if we bought hotels, that we would get reimbursed from FEMA, and we would have to buy hotels with our own funding. So we'd have to use general fund. We were very fortunate in the first round of Home Key that we had the Coronavirus Relief Fund to be able to use it as a match to acquire the 10 hotels that we acquired through the state. As you know, the state gave us a part of that match to be able to buy them. And then we purchased 8 additional properties with our own CRF funding. But again, that's all federal fund. Those are federal funds that were approved in response to COVID, and that is why we can't get reimbursed.
If we can use FEMA funds, you're saying we can't use them to acquire or to buy Project Home Key hotels, but we can use them for Project Room Key hotels.
Well, we can use them, yes, because that's considered a COVID response, but we have to upfront fund the
right.
the rooms.
I guess my question is, it seems logically that we would want to obviously leverage that as much as possible, especially that it's 100%. I'd rather spend the CARES Act and other things on things that we can't use FEMA for and turn this problem into a finance one rather than a resource one. Because if with 100% federal funding, it's no longer a resource question, it's a financing question. Can we get the money up front? And there are lots of creative ways that we can get that money up front and go gangbusters on using it. And to me, that should be a big priority, that we should be financing as much Project Room Key and get everybody off the streets as we possibly can, because we can get reimbursed and focus. I understand the cash flow issue, but that's at least a solvable problem.
We agree, and one of the reasons that we used HAP funding to fund the extension of Project Room Key was because we can get reimbursed from FEMA for that money, and that was the only source that we had at that point, and that's why we're using $32 million of HAP to fund the extension of Project Room Key until March.
Okay, separate issue. The deadline for the from the MOU with the county is coming up, right? That we have 10 months to hit that mark, or we get the $8 million extra the county wanted to incentivize us for building. Are we going to make that deadline? Where are we on those deadlines and the deadline coming up on the judge's deadline on the 16th?
Yes, Councilmember, we're watching that deadline very closely. We are actually, we're in the process of confirming on several projects that are sort of on the bubble what it would take to be a lot more confident that they could be completed on or before April 16th. And we will have a better sense of that at the end of the month or in early March. 'Cause right now we're going through all the projects that are in process and looking at what the timeframes can be, and then what it would take to speed those up so that we can, as if at all possible, hit that deadline. So we're going through project by project right now, and talking to, in the case of the pallet shelters, we're working with BOE to identify what would it take to speed up construction by a couple of weeks on some of the projects. But we are definitely watching that really closely so that we can hit that deadline.
Because that's $8 million.
Yes.
For all the other reasons to hit that deadline, it's also, there's an $8 million incentive there, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then I don't want to take up all the time, but one other question. We were talking about the Triple H, the costs, and you mentioned we're only spending $150,000 and some of the reasons why it's so high. But if we're really at $600,000 a unit, is that, it still seems way out of, even with everything that you said for the rationale for it, it just seems so far beyond what people would expect to pay for. What do you think is a more reasonable amount, or what could we get that down to, and what's the plan for doing that?
Yeah, so council member, that has been a driving question, a driving discussion point around HHH since day one, really. The cost that the city's spending is $135 a unit, and per the controller's audit, the last one, the average cost or the median cost of a HHH unit was $535,000. You compare that to what I call unicorn, unit that people talk about from, you get a lot of folks coming to public meetings saying, I could build those things for $250,000 a unit. And it's like, I would like to see your numbers. Oh, look at the time, I'm not here anymore. In reality, when you really pin down most of the developers that are working in the city and look at their costs, it is very identifiable. The out the door cost for, say, a transit-oriented communities project with no subsidy, no whatever, no prevailing wage, is about $400,000 a unit. And you add prevailing wages, you add all the reserves and developer fees and financing costs. If one of our transit-oriented communities developer buddies builds a project, he doesn't put developer fees or reserves into it because he's going to sell it 3 years after it is, fully occupied. He's going to earn his developer fee at that time. Our supportive housing people are never going to see another dime out of it. They are basically building a fully contained, project that's going to last for 55 years, and they are not going to be able to take money out of it. The cash flow isn't there. So they are earning their developer fee, they're putting up their reserves, and they're paying for prevailing wages. And when you add those costs on, the costs come really close. I did a table for the Citizens Oversight Committee that looked at what drives those. So, and frankly, the costs, I've been at the department for 8 months now, and as I suspected, a lot of the costs in the really high cost projects are self-inflicted wounds by the city. We collectively are asking people to do things like, here, we'll give you a piece of city-owned land. It was a parking lot. We will ask you to not only pay us market rate for it, but to, replace the parking. At which point, we literally had a developer this week go, I can go down the street and buy something cheaper than your city-owned parking lot. Have your lot back. So I think, we need to resolve some of those things about asking people to do, we have some of the same characteristics that we all had when the redevelopment agency was doing housing, and including things beyond the housing goals in those projects. Let's have a neighborhood parklet, or let's have, extra parking or something. And we're paying for that with housing money, which, is a policy decision that we look to you all to make, but we need to be honest that there are the housing costs and then there are the extra costs. And so we've been trying to push back on the extra costs and to really be clearer about what it will take if we're going to fund those.
Thank you, Mr. Blumenfield. I need to move on to another member. Mr. Price. Thank you, Madam President, members. First of all, Madam President, appreciate your leadership on this issue and making sure that it stays in front of all of us and that we're getting the resources that we need. And also to the city family for your work in making sure these programs can come online in a way that's cost effective and that serve. Certainly in CD9, we've been pushing supportive housing, affordable housing,
affordable housing, also the bridge sites, and it resulted in several thousands of housing. But we're really concerned about the emergency temporary shelter needs and opportunities. Like several other districts, we've been looking at the pallet housing process. Good to read about the success Councilman Krikorian has had in his district. But talk a little bit more. You mentioned that it was under review. These potential sites are under review. What kind of support can we expect as we move these projects forward? Once they're identified, what kinds of funding is going to be available to provide the infrastructure that's going to be required to actually make the acquisition of the units. Give us some thinking about how that process is moving forward and what we can expect to see from it.
Councilman, so to clarify, are you asking how we review sites for pallet shelter development?
Well, I'm saying that once they've been identified, what are we looking for to identify those sites? We, for example, were instrumental in helping groups acquire 3 sites by the end of the year using room key funding. But the next step now is determining how many units are possible on those sites and that there are going to be some infrastructure requirements to bring them along. And so what kind of support can we look forward to?
Right. In fact, we're working with the 3 sites that we did acquire with the home key funds, our CRF funding in your district, because the 3 commercial properties that we acquired are in CD9. So we're working with the 3 owners. They are submitting a rehab budget to us for review, because we do intend to come forward with funding recommendations for rehab. Well, we've asked all of the home key owner-operators is that their rehab proposal really include life safety measures and the ADA modifications that they need for the interim housing period. Right, because as you know, the program is outlined where the sites are going to serve as interim housing for up to 5 years and then convert to permanent housing. So we're stressing to the owners that really the rehab they need is life safety and ADA for the interim housing period. And so in fact, we're communicating very closely with the 3 owners in your district, and we're hoping to meet with them next week to review their final rehab budgets and then come forward to council to request approval for the additional rehab for all of the home key sites, and which we expect to fund with ESG funding, which is part of the CARES Act funding that we received.
Great. Another potential site in the district was a Caltrans parking lot there at Slauson and the 110 freeway. We'd had some off and on discussions with Caltrans. Any insight on improved communication, better line of communication, working with the state? There are issues about not only potential parking, issues about trash and debris along the freeway. What's our communication been with Caltrans and their role in providing assistance as we move forward on these issues?
Yes, sir. I can speak to the site itself. That site is currently under review by the Federal Highway Administration, and we're hopeful that we will get a determination to be honest, with the administration change, that we will be able to get a determination on that site. Caltrans is on a weekly meeting on the status of all of the sites that are under development, and we asked them at the top of the meeting about the Federal Highway Administration review. There's actually 2 sites that need Federal Highway Administration clearance in order to be used for interim housing, and as of now, they have indicated that their leadership are working on getting a determination out of the Federal Highway Administration, and we're hopeful we'll find out soon. And then we would be, undertaking the process of as with all the other sites on pallet shelters, looking at layout, budget, cost.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you so much for having this panel discussion today. It's a long time coming, and it really will help clear the air on so many misunderstandings and quite frankly, disinformation that has been promoted over the last several months, if not the last year or so. So this is really illuminating for everyone, and I really appreciate this. I so much appreciate Ann Sewell and your great work thus far with HCID. And I have to hand it to Ms. Chavez and Ms. Barkley for your years of reporting to the Homelessness and Poverty Committee and keeping us informed of all these details on a regular basis. What I think will be especially helpful for the new members on the council is just, I want to fill in a few other blanks, and then I have a few questions to ask. When I chaired the committee for the 2 years at the beginning of 2019, one of the very first things I did was introduce a motion in January that brought up some of the same questions that I'm hearing now, and that is, why do the units cost so much? Let's dive deep and get to the bottom of why the per unit cost is so high, et cetera, et cetera. And you filled in a lot of the blanks again for us, and that's a constantly vexing question. So the motion that I introduced, which generated a report, we heard it in committee. I moved that the council instruct HCID, with the assistance of the CLA and the CAO, to report on the status of Proposition HHH bond funds and the city's strategy of achieving its 10,000 unit goal. With the report included status on all the projects in the Proposition HHH pipeline at the time, the number of units anticipated to be developed with the said funds, the per unit cost, the timeline for project construction completion, and any forthcoming new strategies to meet the city's supportive housing unit goal. And for everyone, the council file on that, and it's 2 years ago, council file 17-0090-S11, that has a subsequent 15-page report that was heard in committee that covers a lot of the same points that Ms. Sewell covered only 2 years ago. And so here was one of the results, or the major result of that report in committee. Up until the time we made the change, the city, through its HHH proposition allocation funding, was allowing up to $220,000 per unit. And we changed that and limited the maximum amount that the city would contribute to any project or any individual unit to $140,000. So we limited the amount of money because I knew that we would never get to the 10,000 units if it was simple math. If we were contributing $220,000 per unit out of that fund, we were not going to get to the 10,000. Now you just heard Ms. Sewell talk about that we're through HHH, we're at nearly 8,000 units. That combined with other funding sources, we're at somewhere in the neighborhood of over 9,500 units, with more money to be expended for HHH projects yet to go. And so taking you back to 2016 very briefly, the backers of HHH, what do they promote? They promoted 10,000 permanent homes for people experiencing homelessness over a 10-year period. So out of whole cloth, when voters in LA approved Proposition HHH in 2016, we built a whole program without creating a bureaucracy. And so the fact that we do have occupied units now, and they'll be cascading in the few short years into the thousands, is not a bad sign. Now, I totally understand and can commiserate with anyone that it's not happening fast enough. There's no one who's going to argue that. But what I will argue is that I think the controller's audit last summer did the entire program a great disservice. And I'll just say that publicly, because what that did is it sowed doubt in the entire program. And even some of the projects that he identified in that audit, the city was only contributing $60,000 per unit. So what we need to do is tell the whole story about these very complicated voter-approved initiatives, because voters knew then and they know now that our number one imperative is getting people under a roof in a safe, clean, supportive environment. And that is still what we are all advocating for. Let me just say that I've went on several lobbying trips to Sacramento. Mr. Krikorian joined me on one of them, and we fought very diligently, and we will continue to do so, that Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, gets the funding that's commensurate with the need since we have nearly 1/3 of the state's homeless population within our city limits. Now, we were very successful in AB 3300, which was Miguel Santiago's bill, that was almost at the finish line through committee and through the legislative process in Seattle. I'm sorry, Sacramento, and then COVID hit. And so what that would have done, it would have been 10 years of $2 billion to address homelessness across the state of California, with the city of Los Angeles and the county of Los Angeles for the first time ever getting its fair share. So COVID interrupted that, but we know that those efforts are still ongoing in Sacramento. I invite anyone to join me in lobbying Sacramento again once the pandemic eases, because we need to collectively fight for the resources that we deserve and that we need. And then just lastly, I will say that Ann talked about the city getting in its own way. We have to break down the barriers with DWP requirements and the Department of Transportation as we build on surface parking lots. We need greater flexibility within our own city family, and that will help bring down the costs a little bit. But just keep in mind that when we build these projects, they include things like conference rooms, offices, clinics, community spaces, playrooms for the children, game rooms. These projects have a lot going for them, and that's expensive. What I would like to see when we start getting the funding that's commensurate with our needs from the state and other resources that we can generate locally and from the federal government is that we move forward with the innovation approach of producing this housing. And so Ann and Meg and Yolanda, perhaps you all could address how that could look moving forward. If we move forward innovatively, how could that bring the per unit cost down, notwithstanding that we still want to pay the prevailing wage and we want to keep to the high standards that we have so far through the HHH production standards. What do you all say about the innovative approach to bringing those costs down?
Yolanda and Meg, maybe I'll start. So you mentioned one of the innovations that we did, Councilmember, almost inadvertently. When we started the program, the Councilmember De Leon and others up in their other lives up in Sacramento were working on getting the No Place Like Home funding out the door, but we were anticipating that, but we didn't have it. So the city created a loan limit per unit of 220,000 greater. So developers weren't having to go to as many places. And because we actually innovated, let's use the underutilized 4% low-income housing tax credit that was non-competitive at the time. Unfortunately, all our sister cities around the state, glommed onto that idea right after we did, so it became competitive. But people could go to HHH and get their funding and go to their bank for a mortgage loan and to the tax credit committee for their 4% credits and be done with it. And things went, for that first batch of projects with the higher loan limits, they went a lot faster. So one somewhat counterintuitive thing might be that we allow certain projects that, that are going to do innovative things. Maybe it's modular housing, maybe it's some of the other that we're testing right now, to not have to go to so many sources, that we increase the loan limit for some of them. That's really the secret sauce that makes things go faster. And it doesn't get you your 10,000 units, but we're there now. So we could test that innovation. That's one thing. And then we are testing, even though I hear the comments when projects come forward of, you call that innovative? It's only, 20,000 less per unit than others, but it's research and development. It takes some trial and error to see how it works out. So we are testing other innovations in construction and in financing in the housing challenge projects that I think we could, go deeper into in the next round.
Ladies, you want to just quickly answer?
Oh,
So I need to move on to our next member. Don't mean to cut you off, but you want to answer, Mr. O'Farrell, so I can move on?
Sure. I think just very briefly, I would just add that we are testing innovations, including in interim housing, in terms of modular on interim. And I have to tell you, at this point, it has not gone faster. I don't think it's been any cheaper. And I think, as Ann says, the one way to move very fast is if you fund the entire project. But then, at that point, you're not funding $135 per unit on average. You're going to be funding $500,000 a unit. That's the way you go faster.
No easy options, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. Mr. Buscaino?
Thank you, Madam President, and I do want to echo Mr. O'Farrell's comments. Appreciate your leadership, Council President Martinez, in allowing us to elevate what we as a city are doing as it relates to solving the homelessness crisis and advancing on critical housing projects. Can you imagine, colleagues, if the other 87 cities can match what we're doing in the city of Los Angeles? Then we will solve homelessness in this county, in this region. In fact, that's my question to the panel. How do our efforts in dollars spent, dollar investments, number of beds compare to the rest of the county? Let's be mindful in a county of Mr. Ridley Thomas can attest to this, as a county of 10 million people, 6 million residents live in either the unincorporated part of the county or the other 87 cities in the county. How do our efforts compare to the rest of the county?
So I would say that that's, as staff, that's been one of our frustrations, is that the city of LA has had a housing financing system and program for at least the last 25 years. No other city in the county has a program like ours. No other city, as far as we know, is developing interim housing at the level we are. And we also have most of the homeless services housed within the city of LA. And so we've always felt the rest of the county is not doing their part.
The other thing I would add that could go a lot, because I understand, especially a lot of the cities are a lot smaller. They don't have, even the grants they get wouldn't be enough to do one project. But no other cities are enacting the policies that the city of LA has enacted around planning. Like if some critical mass of cities were to have similar permanent supportive housing ordinances to the city of Los Angeles, that would be a game changer, because developers would have more options on land, cheaper land, and even with the financing that they're able to get from other sources, the county included, through No Place Like Home, we would see those developments happening just more naturally and also probably cheaper in other parts of the county than they're able to develop here. Even if those cities did not have the kind of infrastructure that the city of LA has, just by changing policies similar to the ones that the city of LA has been able to enact, in similar situations, like our CEQA exemptions may even be able to be adapted to apply. I think that would make a huge difference in the kinds of development that could happen. So in addition to even financing, just being willing to change policies to be more open to these things happening, even from private developers or service providers, would make a huge difference.
Let me do recognize, and Mr. Bonner reminds me that Culver City's moving on some solutions. I want to recognize Redondo Beach moving on some pallet shelters. Of course, Torrance, working with Mayor Fury, is looking at some of the pallet shelters. Gardina's looking at some pallet shelters as well. Members, we can't do this alone, clearly. And I don't see the advocates banging on these other cities' doors demanding justice and equity, and this is something that I have struggled with over the years in trying to solve homelessness. Particularly in my district, we're advancing over 2,000 beds that are already in place. We're also in the pipeline, storage bins, safe parking, housing for all, saying yes to all solutions, all of the above approach moving forward. And I'm hopeful that our colleagues in other parts of the county are anxious to pass an HHH type ballot measure. I'm hearing crickets today. So we'll continue to do our part. Madam President, thank you for allowing us to elevate what we are doing as a city and recognize how we're advancing on these projects. And I see on my screen collectively, I would say over 100 years of public service at the state and local level. Members, if we can't solve this, then we all might as well pack up and go home, but we can't solve this alone.
Thank you, Mr. Buscaino. Mr. Bonin?
Thank you, Madam President. And as others have said, let me thank you for putting these discussions together. I look forward to this and others. A couple questions, mostly for Meg, but first a question for Yolanda. Yolanda, I was looking over the slide that you presented, which showed the cost of the bridge. And of course, we know that the ultimate cost was, I guess, 8, 9, maybe 10 times higher than it was predicted when we first started talking about it, where it was supposed to be $1 million a pop. The reality turned out to be a lot different. I saw your calculations, and it's based on, the bed turning over twice a year and stuff. Do we know what the real costs are? Because the beds aren't turning over twice a year, particularly because of the COVID crisis, and a lot of the next steps have been taken up by people in Project Roomkey. And a lot of the facilities aren't at their capacity because of Project Roomkey. We know what the current cost is if we calculate it with the real number of beds and the real bed rate?
So our understanding from LASA is that at this point, the rate is still about twice a year. I'm sure some of the sites, and Meg can probably speak more to that, have had to reduce their occupancy. But when we calculate the costs for, say, any of the roadmap projects, we do want to assume that once we're able to have 100% of the beds occupied, we want to, to be able to compare apples to apples, is we need to do that cost if it was 100% occupied, with the understanding that at this point, most of them will not be, but hopefully by summer they will be. So I guess that's my
I would
answer.
love to see anything from LASA that documents that the average rate is the beds are being used twice a year. Maybe if people fall out, but I certainly don't think that the average is the beds are being used twice by people who are going into long-term placements.
We will confirm if
love
that's
to
still
see
the
that,
rate.
and I hope we can request that from LASA.
Yes.
Okay, we will confirm if that's still the rate at this point.
I know the
Thank
average
you.
length of stay.
A couple
has-
questions for Meg. Your slide, Meg, said that there are 8,252 interventions in process.
Yes.
What's the breakdown of what those interventions are, and what does in process mean?
So in process are all the interventions that are funded and in some stage of construction. So that's not including all of the sites that are currently being reviewed and may be added to this over time as the feasibility is determined and funding is approved. The breakdown of, I don't have the breakdown summarized for all of the 8250, but I can, or 8252, but I can get that to you. But I do have the breakdown for the sites that have opened since June, if that would be.
So the
I don't have it
4 or
summarized, I
5
have a chart.
pallet or safe camping sites we're looking at in my district wouldn't be counted towards that because we don't know the exact number and they're not online, right?
I'm sorry, what was the
pallet locations we're looking at in my district,
Right.
or safe camping, those would not count towards the 8252, right?
they would be in addition to that because we want it
Okay.
to be, so this is more, these are the sure things that are going to happen.
So
and
these are,
currently
yeah,
under
just to be really
development.
clear, these are all the ones that are approved and funded.
Yeah, and that's why I'm trying to sort of get to the bottom of it a little bit. So the 2 home key purchases we made in December in my district, the Ramada and the Super 8, are those 77 units counted as the 8252?
Yes, sir.
Okay. These are things that are approved but are not necessarily online yet.
A portion of them are online. There's the 2,580 of those interventions are currently online, and the rest of them are in development.
Okay, and are we counting only new beds that come with brick and mortar, or are we also counting rapid rehousing vouchers or shared housing and other things? as an intervention?
Yes, so the 8252 does include the 3,000 rapid rehousing shared housing slots that were approved from the ESG COVID funding, and the 2,580 interventions that are open now includes 499 placements from that 3,000 that are currently, so that's people that have been placed.
So 2,500 of the 3,000 have been placed into non-brick and mortar accommodations.
No, 499 of the 3,000 rapid rehousing placements have been made to date.
Oh, 499 have been made. I thought there was 499.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yes.
So there's a lot that still have not been placed.
Exactly.
The reason I ask is I'm feeling a huge disconnect between the reality on the streets in my district and the numbers we see in the presentations. The numbers look high, but I've got my agencies that are trying to work near the freeways saying that mostly the resources they have available to them are PRK, which is at the moment winding down, although it might wind back up after the FEMA, or motel vouchers, but the motel vouchers are becoming more scarce, and that the other resources just aren't making it out to them yet. Do we know why there's that gap between the reality on the streets and what we have authorized?
I know that getting because the LOS has been putting both the city-funded rapid rehousing vouchers funding and also the county CRF-funded rapid rehousing, all of this, the funding the city and the county have approved for this recovery rehousing or rapid rehousing in response to COVID. It was a struggle getting all of those contracts out to the service providers, and it took longer than they wanted it to, but they have been executed now. And I think that and I know that there's been an effort that was right now to also try and to get targets for each service provider, how many placements per month they're going to be making out of those. And I think that those resources should be starting to become more real on the street. I absolutely respect and understand that, and it's an ongoing frustration of mine that because the problem is so vast, that the level of effort that we're making it's difficult to measure the impact on the overall problem, and it's spread out, and so the impact on the street in any one location is really difficult to measure. I absolutely sympathize with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, because the measure of success isn't how many things we funded or how many things we've authorized. It's how many people have been brought safely indoors. I know the plan is supposed to rehouse the nearly 5,000 PRK folks, and I think it's also supposed to house the remaining 10,000 who were targeted for PRK that never got into a hotel room, right?
Well, it's 6,700 interventions total. Yeah. The priority was and the target populations is the population near the freeway, people who are 65 or older, and people who are otherwise vulnerable to COVID-19. So that is the PRK population, those last two. And so there's 3,100 estimated. The estimate for the population near the freeway is 3,100 individuals, so that would make the other 5,600 interventions targeting those other populations. So it doesn't get at the full number. The way the 6,000 was an estimate early on of the city kind of proportion of that 15,000 number initially, which was the estimate of the homeless population that would be eligible for PRK, whether they were in a hotel or not. That was sort of the basis for the 6,000 number initially. So it was based on, at least based on COVID need. And then with the dynamics of the Alliance lawsuit, the freeway population edged in to be a focus of that, whereas not a lot of folks that are PRK eligible are estimated to be within that freeway population, but we just don't know, for sure. But that's sort of the situation for the 6,700 that's in the agreement.
So real quick, because I want to wrap up, because I know there's others on the queue. I have seen somewhere, and I honestly don't remember if it's the LA Times or if it's somewhere on social media, something that is sort of like a Project Room Key tracker, which says what our goal was, how many units have been leased, how many people have been placed. I'd love to see the same for our plan. How many interventions or solutions have been approved and funded? How many people have actually been placed and stay placed? Because what I'm hearing more and more is with Project Room Key, people are falling out of it. Many of them because they're not allowed to leave. That there's restrictions upon them that are different than we place upon people who live in other accommodations. That there's a different curfew and that they don't have the same freedom of movement, and so some of them leave. I'm also hearing more and more that motel vouchers, which used to automatically be available to an unhoused family with kids, those are drying up, and I think there's a lot of pain out there that still isn't getting captured by what we're doing, and I'd like us to be able to track that as closely as possible and always look at how many people are housed versus how many things we have authorized or funded.
Yes, sir. There's 2 documents that I'll make sure to forward to your staff as well after the meeting is over. Every time we do a roadmap funding report, we provide the status of all of the interventions that have been funded by council district according to those 3 categories of the timing, the interventions by April 16th, the ones that were in existing agreements and the ones that were not, and the interventions due by December 16th, so that the council can have a picture of where we are relative to those targets. And then every quarter when we report to the county and the court, there is a chart, like a table that is a quarterly report that shows all of the interventions that are in progress and for which ones have opened, who's been placed by the target roadmap categories. And so I can make sure that you have the most recent versions of both of those.
And if we could also get a sense, whenever we approve funding, where it is in the pipeline. You know, we approved something months ago, then there's the contract. In a lot of the interventions I need right now to get people who want to get out from under the freeway at Venice and the 405, that hasn't hit the streets yet. And I think we need to know, is it still with the city? Is it with LASA? Is it with the agency? Where is it? And we almost need a sort of a real-time money tracker, because it's still not happening, at least where I need it to be. Thanks.
I hear you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bonin. Mr. De Leon?
Thank you very much, Madam President. I want to thank Yolanda, Amy, as well as Ann Sewell for coming down and giving us a sort of an overall presentation on roadmap as well as HHH. And I'm clearly aware that Ann Sewell specifically has been on the job for 8 months. So a lot has been inherited, a lot of decision making with regards to criteria and awarding of the grants. But I, representing my constituents for CD14 and obviously having, the largest number of unhoused individuals in the entire city, and for that matter, again, in comparison to the unhoused communities in the city of Sacramento, San Jose, Oakland, Stockton, San Diego, Houston, and Chicago, I still have more unhoused individuals than those cities do. So obviously Skid Row and CD14 is ground zero. That being said, and I really appreciate a lot of the comments from the members, I want to go back a little bit to what Councilmember Bob Blumenfield was asking with regards to costs. I know there's been a lot of discussions with regards to costs. I'm going to still maintain the following, that with regards to HHH, it's still far too expensive. It's far too costly. The building of our units as well. It's just taking much too long. And the reason why I say that, and this is why it's really important, is when the units are very, very expensive, that means we have less units online. If we have less units online, we have only the lucky ones who will receive the lotto and get access to that. Well, we have a large portion of folks who still will live, in misery in our city streets, in our alleyways, in our parks, in their RVs, as well as cars. When it takes too long, also too, the reality is we have more people who die, on our streets because it's taken so long, and there's the lack of sense of urgency. When I say lack of sense of urgency, I say it in a collective way, and I include elected officials, I include, folks who work in the city, the county, the state, as well as the federal government. So I kind of include all of us. But as long as the price points are high, again, we have less units online. As long as it takes too long to build, we have more folks who are much more vulnerable to the elements, especially with the extreme weather patterns, climate change, and more lives perish. Ansel said something that I agree with 100%, is we can't get out our own way in many ways. And whether it is LADWP on hookups, whether it is LA Fire Department, whether it is planning, or whether it is building and safety, and a whole host of other agencies, Department of Transportation. One thing that I've sort of witnessed so far is there is no communication. Folks don't really talk to each other. And it's really important that, those silos be broken down so we can expedite the permitting, the processes, so we can get these units constructed again sooner rather than later. And what I would hope would be a lower price point, so we can actually, have more units, so we can house more people who are living on the streets today. I was the one in last week's Homeless and Poverty Committee who did question a particular development that was a recipient, a beneficiary of the Innovative Challenge Grant. I will say this, I think on the PowerPoint presentation, I think the average, contribution or award from HHH is about $135,000, more or less. The award for this particular development from HHH was $113,000, as opposed to $135,000, which gives us a cost savings of $22,000. I think it was mentioned off the top of my head, correct me if I'm off the figure, which I probably will be, the average total cost per unit is roughly about 500, I should say, 35 or 550, more or less in that ballpark figure. The total cost per unit was 509, and they're not going to break ground on this development until March or April of 2022. The point I want to make here is I don't find a lot of innovation or creation or any creativity, and I don't know what has been challenged. I do maintain this perspective, and it's very different from some of my colleagues, on this board right now. But I'm looking at the output, and I'm not looking at the input. The inputs are good when we see the PowerPoint presentations. I'm looking at the output, and something that Councilmember Mike Bonin also mentioned too, is I look at the decks, and then I look at the streets. And I look at two very different realities that are happening here. And I think that when we deal with, obviously, and the points are very well made, and they're accurate, and they're real. When we talk about the soft costs, when we talk about mechanical engineering, when we're talking about architectural design, when we're talking about entitlements, when we're talking about consultants, when we're talking about lawyers, when we talk about all of these soft costs and then we have our land costs as well too, it gets up there without a doubt. And I think it is incumbent on all of us collectively that we're going to have to dramatically lower those costs, in some instances eliminate costs altogether, to drive down to get to and what you said, to find that unicorn and make that unicorn and scale it up in some form, way, or fashion. Because I want to go back, ultimately, we have this challenge. HHH is going to run out soon, very soon. How much money we're going to get from the state? Is it going to be ongoing? Is it going to be one-time dollars? Are we going to rely on our friends and colleagues in the state legislature to pass a 2/3, tax hike on whoever it may be on? How much money we're going to get from the federal government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. one-time dollars, we can't commingle it with this. This is not fungible there. And we're trying to figure out from all the different pots how we get that money. And I know that is a very, very challenging thing. But what the money that we have now, I think it's absolutely essential that we stretch it to get the value, to get the volume that we need in the most efficient manner in the quickest possible way. Now, it may or may not be, a unicorn or a shadow of a unicorn, but land costs, which were assumed by LA County because it's their property. We had the Bigness project, and I think it's roughly about $225,000. If ultimately at the end of the day, that's what it pencils out to be when the dust is all settled. It's going to be up in 3 to 4 months. It's my understanding. It's about 176 square feet. I think when it comes to specs, we have to define what those outcomes are, as opposed to our developer friends who come, take the money, and they define what the specs are ultimately at the end of the day. And, Councilmember Mitchell Farrell brought up some important points. When we talk about conference rooms, when we talk about offices, when we talk about rooms for children, not every unit, not every development is going to have that. Some are very different. We have cohorts that are going to be very, permanently supportive housing. Other folks don't need as many services because as long as they have a roof over their head, they can stabilize, they can move forward with life. So everyone's different in our own homeless community as a whole. But I just want to add that because I think that collectively, and myself, all of our colleagues and everyone together, we can try to figure out, because as we get more money, we can't work the same system that we have. We're going to have to make major modifications and changes because we're going to have less units that ultimately are going to be available. And in a perfect world, we would have that ongoing dollars, those ongoing dollars, as Mitchell Farrell had just mentioned before, going up to the Capitol and lobbying to get those dollars, especially because in Southern California and LA, we have the vast majority of our unhoused community members. Question I have, and it's in general for Yolanda or Ann, because of the beds we have with regards to the LA Alliance agreement with the city and county, and if we've surpassed our 6,700 number right now, what is the plan for the rest of our unhoused community members who are living on the streets today?
So the plan is really what the city has been doing all of these years is, continuing to finance the development of permanent units because, as that's really the solution to get people off the streets, a permanent unit. Even our interim housing program is really interim, right? The whole point is to stabilize people moving into permanent, but that is our plan. It's going to require a lot more resources, and you're right. We don't have enough resources to continue to do this, In fact, we'll come back in a few weeks to let you know where we are on the roadmap, because at some point the council will have to make a decision, and it's really based on the operating cost and the liability that we'll have on the interim beds. So at least on the interim housing part of this, I think the council is going to have to make those decisions. In terms of how much more we do and continue, I would let Ann respond to the permanent housing solution, but so I'll leave it as that. But I would want to add, Mr. De Leon, that I think market rate developers will probably not show you their performance, but the cost of a unit they're building is probably not that much different from the cost of any affordable housing unit. The difference is probably just the city and public fund requirements, but this is where our market is. The construction market in the city is one of the highest in the entire country. And most of the major cities in the country have the situation. So I don't think there's a large difference here. The Bigness project is a really good example of what happens when the county owns its land because of sovereign immunity. They can entitle it within a day. I'm exaggerating, I'm sure, but it's just great that they can do that, but they're also funding the entire cost of the project at $48 million. I mean, that's their budget. I actually have asked them for a detailed budget because it would be interesting to see the difference between the interim units and the permanent units they're building in terms of costs. But they're funding that at $48 million. And so that's really an example that if you own the land, you can entitle it yourself, you're willing to pay 100% of the cost of the project, and then build it without having to go out and bid on a contractor, is that you can build it in 6 months, but you need to pay that all of that, have all of that, own the land, and be able to upfront pay $48 million for the entire cost of the project.
And I think that when it comes out to not assuming the land cost being factored in, but at $225,000 per unit, I think that these are further, decisions that we have to make as a city collectively with regards to land, whether it be city land, whether it be county land, whether it be state land like Caltrans, for example, or federal land, and how we can actually lower those costs dramatically. You make a very good point, because I think when it comes to city and state regulations and requirements, that's when it's important, I think, for city staff to come to us and to say, hey, this is very onerous right here. This is adding, an exorbitant amount of dollars. We need your help. We need your help to make the changes that are necessary through council, or we need your help to make the phone calls and to Mitchell Farrell's point, flying up, Burbank, getting out off a plane, going to meet a lot of our friends there and saying, this here may have been germane 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's not helping us right now. It's eating up a lot of the costs. And as a result, the costs are going up. So on the city and state regulations, even when it comes to federal stuff, we have a lot of friends here. There's a lot of relationships with our California and LA congressional delegation. We can pick up the phone, because I know a lot of that stuff is bogging us down. And it is adding to the cost. And we want to sort of, I guess the point is streamline as much as we can possible, because the overall goal, I think we all share this goal, is we just want to put more out there online as quick as possible for the lowest price point as possible, so we can build as much as we can possible. So that will actually help us a tremendous amount.
Mr. De Leon, I need to move on to the next member. Thank you, Ms. Rahman.
Thank you so much, Council President. Thank you to all of you for making the time to make these presentations today. I just wanted to make a really brief point, which is really that, we've been seeing reports from researchers that are looking at a potential rise in homelessness at the end of the evictions moratorium period after COVID. And I just would really push for us as a council, and both in the Homelessness Committee and in the Housing Committee, to think about evictions protections and a right to counsel, and a funded right to counsel as part of I think a proactive strategy of responding to this potential rise in homelessness. I would love to do as much as we can together to make sure that we're not having this conversation about a much larger number of people and a much bigger gap between the number of housing units that we have available and the number of people experiencing homelessness next year. And just wanted to make sure that either in the next update or in the committees that where we're discussing these issues in a more granular way, that we're bringing in that, what dollars the city's putting towards homelessness prevention actively, particularly towards getting information out about tenant protections to residents actively, which is a very cheap way of, I think, shoring up residents in their homes, and towards a right to counsel, which I think, again, is a cost-effective way of keeping people housed. And I think something that the city of Los Angeles can do better on post the lifting of the eviction moratorium. So just wanted to add that to the discussion today, and hopefully reach out to everyone who presented today to talk about that in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Koretz?
Thank you, Madam President. And we'll be discussing the controller's report on HHH in his audit in personnel audits and animal welfare this afternoon, so I won't ask HHH questions. But I have one question about interim housing, which is one of the biggest challenges we face, and certainly the biggest challenge I face with these projects, is getting prospective sites approved for consideration. I don't know how we can create a heightened sense of urgency or a drive to be more flexible, but so far it seems that we're being so picky that even though it's taken me an extended period of time, we now have several substantial buildings that are available to us, and yet they still don't get approved for consideration. So I don't know how we could expedite this process and add flexibility and be more open to additional projects. But if we're going to get anywhere, when we find the locations, we've got to approve them for consideration, and we've got to move them through the process. So are there any ideas out there to improve this situation?
So Councilman, we're going to be releasing a report shortly on all of the sites that were assessed that were deemed infeasible, but you should know that as soon as we get sites proposed by council members, we immediately start the process in terms of having GSD call the owner if it's a private property to see if they're willing to lease. So anything where the owner is willing to lease or let us use it if it's a public facility, we immediately start working on that to see if it can work. If you're getting a response that it's not feasible, it's really because many of the owners may not be willing to lease to us. And then there are also certain requirements, especially on pallet shelters, in terms of the lot size, right? Because we need to have the lot needs to have enough space for not only the pallet shelters, but the administrative offices, the hygiene trailers, so storage area so that people can really come in and bring their belongings in. I can tell you that we are working on at least one great site in your district that we hope to be able to get back to your office shortly. And your district has been especially difficult, but we think that we have some really good possibilities there.
And I know in our case, we're being told that we have this one great site. So the other two buildings that also seem very well suited for a variety of purposes are being held because we're looking just at this one great site. When we have three of them, we've double checked. The other two are still interested in leasing. We don't want to miss that opportunity when we have the sites in our hands and available. So anything I can do to encourage consideration of these other two buildings, and rather than finding excuses for why we can't consider them, just get them considered and help us bring them online.
Right. And just one more thing on private sites, sir, is that even if they're willing to lease, part of the assessment that happens on private properties is the rehab that has to occur, to bring it up to ADA, especially modifications, to be able to include the beds. And sometimes that could be extremely expensive, and if the owner's not willing to do it, or it may just be cost prohibitive, but I mean, that's part of the analysis we go through, so we will definitely get back to you on the other two sites as well.
Yeah, because and that analysis is we actually have, in order to both expedite and be as creative as possible, we've engaged Brilliant Corners in the work of looking at those private sites because of the experience that they have directly doing that in the city of LA and with the city requirements. And sometimes it's a question of, there's a lot of sites that are sort of in the queue there, but that there's some, in some points that can end up being a bottleneck. We meet with them weekly to try and push those assessments along, but typically the good thing about it is that once we get a cost estimate out there, in our experience, it's remained pretty accurate, and that there have not needed to be significant changes. They don't miss a fire safety requirement or things like that. And so but we definitely have one back. We're looking at a couple of other follow-up questions, and we'll get back to you with it very soon, and then we could put the other ones in the queue.
Thank you.
Mr. Ridley Thomas?
Madam President, may I express the appreciation for the fact that the council and your leadership is resolved from a collective perspective, not simply to understand, but to substantially improve our response to the homeless crisis that defines a significant portion of the quality of life in the city of Los Angeles and our policy agenda. I want to hasten to make the point that we have a huge opportunity to consistently dissect our approaches and our systems, learn what is working, and commit to correct and or improve that which is not working. Some of this has been begun in the Homelessness and Poverty Committee. As you know, Madam President and colleagues, we had a preliminary presentation on the existing city-county comprehensive crisis response system. We did an initial overview of the broad components that frame our response, namely street engagement, interim housing, permanent housing and prevention, as well as supportive services, which effectively undergird each component. It is the committee's intent, Madam Chair, with your concurrence, that we dig deeper, offer constructive critique, and work to scale up that which we find to be good practices, best practices, and indeed promising practices that the council at large can embrace. So for example, in future meetings, we will look carefully not to just those components that make up our response, but also at the issue of governance, the budgetary framework, and our response that speaks to the efficacy of the homeless strategies that have been tested up to this point. And I hope, Madam President and colleagues, that we can create opportunities among all of our respective staff members to regularly convene and to discuss many of these issues. I also think that there's an opportunity to forge a stronger collaboration and partnership between the city of Los Angeles and the county of Los Angeles. That's a big ticket item. If we really want to spell success, if the county of Los Angeles wants to be successful in addressing the homeless crisis in Los Angeles, it must come to grips with the fact that the city of Los Angeles is the epicenter of homelessness in this county. Therefore, we are obliged to work together as effectively as possible. Some of that is already being done. More needs to be done. And I hope our teams can create regular discussions with our respective counterparts to ensure that there's cohesion and coordination as the work is undeniably, and some would argue inextricably, linked. Madam President, it is no secret that I hope these discussions can shape a legislative or policy and a budgetary conversation as it relates to the right to housing in the city of Los Angeles. We put that forth, and we'll be grinding further in terms of our appreciation and understanding of what that entails. We will not effectively move the needle, as it were, without reimagining what our response to homelessness can and should be. That obviously involves dedicated resources. It costs to deal with this issue of homelessness. Can't get around it, no matter what anybody might assert to the contrary. But I hasten to make this point. It costs for us to maintain the status quo as it currently exists. The cost in terms of public safety resources, the cost in terms of healthcare resources. Homelessness is exorbitantly costly. And that's why we must speak, preach, and practice the language of prevention in order for us to do much better than we are currently doing. I think it should be appreciated that perfection is the enemy of the good. We need to get busy. We simply have to move an agenda that spells progress, not perfection. I think the people of this city will recognize it when they see it and know that we are working as effectively as is humanly possible to address the crisis that envelops the lives of unhoused residents. What do I think, Madam President, colleagues? I think we have to work harder. I think we have to work smarter, and I believe we have to work faster. Madam President.
Ms. Rodriguez?
And ladies, I want to thank you, Anne, and
Ms. Rodriguez, we're having a hard time hearing you. I'm not sure if it's on your end or ours.
okay.
Just
Hold
check
on.
your microphone.
I'll get a little closer. Can you guys hear me better now?
Yeah, that's much better. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to thank you ladies so much for your presentations today. And I just had a question regarding the Project Home Key sites. And I know, so much of the per unit costs that when we're talking about permanent supportive housing and some of these facilities has a lot to do with the density of the projects. And that affects the cost per unit. And we have to have real conversations about the densities and perhaps the opportunities to maximize that to achieve greater, improved per unit cost. That said, with respect to the work that is we're undergoing currently with Project Home Key and the acquisitions of these motel sites, what are we looking at in per unit cost for rehabilitation of such acquisitions? What resources are being utilized for that? And what are the minimum and maximum thresholds that service providers are saying is kind of the best outputs for them in terms of, what's a minimum of a per unit facility that they, in order for them to make it cost effective for them to provide service, and what is the maximum? If there was a, 500 unit hotel, is that actually, practical? And so I think having a guideline in that would be beneficial if you might have some insight on that.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'll take this one. So we're finding, as you know, the Project Home Key program was fast, implemented quickly, to say the least. And one of the things that's sort of a challenge about the amount of time that we had to really assess the project, each property, was getting a really good handle on the cost of the upgrades that would be needed to meet, as Yolanda mentioned earlier, the sort of minimal accessibility and life safety requirements in order to operate these sites as interim housing. And so right now we're going through, and some of the hotels are in better shape than others. And right now we're going through, we've asked all of the owner operators in Home Key to provide their budgets for what are the costs now that most of these sites have architectural plans for those upgrades in place, and it's much easier and more accurate to get an estimate off of plans than off of the very kind of hastily prepared, but necessarily hastily prepared physical needs assessments that we use for the initial rehab estimates. Having estimates based off of architectural plans is a much more accurate, we'll get much more accurate numbers. And so we're reviewing, we have a request in from all of the owner operators for all of the hotels. We're reviewing them now and scheduling some time to talk through those to get really to what is the actual cost for those critical accessibility and life safety upgrades. The funding that we have available for those upgrades is really the remaining money that's been set aside in the ESG COVID allocation. And so that's what we're looking at is we're trying to keep it to the that would be the upper limit of the total cost for the rehab across all of the sites. I think, it's one of those lessons learned. I think that, obviously if the sites we'd had more time, would have been able to get a better estimate up front.
Thank you. On the service providing end, do you guys have an idea, again, the minimum and maximum units that they recommend for providing services?
Oh, the number of units for providing services okay, sorry. Not exactly. I think it would go to I think we're kind of in line on a lot of these sites on the maximum the operating cost is at around $85 per room per night for those. I think that would probably be the same in a larger building versus a smaller building, because that's paying for the cost to actually manage and maintain the building as well as hire staff and to provide the services.
But I think, Councilwoman, if you're asking what's the maximum number of rooms that service providers would feel comfortable providing services, what we've heard from them and from LASA is that 100 is really something they don't want to go beyond, right? So having a 500-unit hotel is like, you'd have to have several providers, right, running that. Mm-hmm. And then it's a whole challenge with the owner-operators. I think when we come back with the additional recommendations on rehab, we'll be able to give you the cost per unit on rehab just for the interim housing, of course, phase of the program, as well as give you an update on the state match, where we ended up with the state on the match for those that we got a match for and for those that we purchased outright. In any case, I think the CRF funding was really a godsend in helping us do this and acquire these 18 properties, basically within 3 months, and actually shorter for some, and I just want to say we couldn't have done it without HACLA, so they were just great, and so I do want to make sure that you all know that HACLA was a great partner in being able to acquire these sites.
Yolanda, and I think, again, talking about the 100-unit maximum that service providers are comfortable with is an important number for everyone to remember, because we also have limited bandwidth with service providers, and that's an important part of this conversation. So when people are talking about acquisitions of large-scale buildings and we need 500, we're talking about large-scale hotels in some circumstances, that the bigger issue is about how do we case manage these individuals to support them in the needs that they have. And they're all going to be vastly different based on the emergency circumstances with which we're approaching each of their individual needs. So I just wanted to kind of identify that as another area of opportunity for us to reflect on, because, I've looked to newer service providers, incubating agencies like North Valley Caring Services that weren't on the radar initially among all the service providers available in the city, but we also have limited bandwidth in that area as well. And it's something for us to be mindful of as we have these conversations, because it's not just about the roof, it's about the services that come along with it. And that's an important part of the conversation, that we need to make sure that we have operational bandwidth with the service providers to help meet those needs as well. So thank you, ladies, all very much. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Mr. Krikorian?
Thank you, Madam President. Let me just first say thank you, Madam President, for scheduling this time so that we can talk about some of the issues that, and not only just talk about these issues, but inform the public about what's actually going on. Because I think, to Mr. O'Farrell's point, a few other people have mentioned, sometimes there's an awful lot of grandstanding that gets done on these issues that doesn't convey the degree of the effort that is being exerted by the city and by others in public service. And there isn't a lot of accurate information out there about the extraordinary lengths and the extraordinary expense, to Mr. Ridley Thomas's point, that this city is going to in order to address this greatest humanitarian crisis, catastrophe of our lifetimes. And it's important that I think the public hear this. And I also want to take just a moment to really thank the three women that we're speaking to, Yolanda Chavez, Meg Barkley, and Ann Sewell, who have, each and every one of them, endured endless criticism. And even while they're doing absolutely unbelievable work in a time of crisis with limited resources to try to address this problem to the greatest degree that we can. And I especially want to mention Yolanda and Meg for all that you have done to help me in my district addressing some of the crisis situations that we're facing. And as a result of your support and the mayor's support and the work that we've been able to do together, we have been able to put up over 600 interim housing beds just in the last year. Within a few months, we opened up our first tiny home village this week. There will be 2 more coming within the next 3 months. And when we're done with those facilities, as well as the 2 bridge home facilities that we've already put up, we'll have enough shelter for every single person in my district who's currently living on a sidewalk or in a park, every single one. And at a cost, by the way, less than the average bridge home site throughout the city. So this can be done with concerted effort, and I appreciate all of the effort that our panelists have engaged in. But I also want to really reinforce what Ms. Rodriguez was just saying, because our role in this is vitally important, but it's not exclusive. We just have to continue to accelerate the work that we're doing to provide shelter, to provide longer term housing, and all of the other elements of this crisis that we're addressing. But we also need a lot more help from our friends at the county, especially in providing mental health care and public health services and outreach and all of the other things that we need in order to make this construction of shelter and housing a success. We need a lot more help from our friends in the state and federal government to provide funding for housing, for affordable housing, for supportive housing and otherwise. And while I'm hopeful that this new administration will provide an opportunity to do that, we can never take our foot off the accelerator in demanding that the other layers of government that are actually responsible for these things step up and take accountability for them and start doing them. In this country, we've essentially abandoned mental health care for the last half century. And we're reaping the results of that right now. And that is not a problem that the City Council of Los Angeles is going to be able to fix by itself. We need the county to accelerate and increase its devotion to caring for people suffering from mental health problems dramatically if we're going to have an impact on this. Judge Carter mentioned in his order the other day an example of a woman on Skid Row who was literally naked in the rain, in danger probably of dying because of her untreated mental illness. And the people that came to help her were Councilmember Kevin De Leon and several nonprofit organizations. And significantly missing from that list to me was county mental health. So if we don't have 24-hour constant accessibility of mental health professionals funded by the county to start coming and resolving these situations, I'm afraid that we're going to continue on this cycle of spending more and more and getting not the results and outcomes that we need to get. So I didn't mean to end on that negative note. I wanted to end on the positive note of again, thanking Yolanda, Meg, and Ann for all you've done to help move the ball so far forward in the construction and support of new shelter and housing that we've provided. Obviously, we have much further to go, but I think anybody who actually looks at these facts can't come away from this and say, well, why is the city just sitting on its hands? We're not. We are moving forward aggressively. Every single member of this council is moving forward aggressively. And we just need the support and the help for services and the addressing the social problems that are causing the homelessness in the first place to be addressed much more aggressively by our colleagues in public service. So, Madam President, thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Cedillo. I have a few questions. I'm sorry, Mr. Krikorian. I'm about to call on Mr. Cedillo. Mr. Cedillo, go ahead, and then I have a few questions, and I know these ladies have to get going. So, Mr. Cedillo, thank you, Mr. Krikorian. Mr. Cedillo?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. Let me, first of all, applaud everybody for their efforts and their participation. Let me begin by thanking you for your leadership on this matter, but reiterate the words of Mr. Krikorian, who said it best. Everyone here has a impressive record of being committed to their districts and doing all that we can to help this population. This is the harder work, much more difficult than the sloganeering that all of us are familiar with all our meetings. This is actually where and how the real work gets done. There was a notice that we should look at prevention as being one of the elements of our strategy as we go forward. And I just want to note that for us, it would require for us, I think, a question around the evictions. We need to take a critical look at when this moratorium is lifted. We have to be very thoughtful about it. There's a lot of talk about a tsunami, but we need to be very specific about our moratorium. We are not cities in the East. We are not cities in the other cities in the state. We are the city of Los Angeles. We need to look at our moratorium, one of the more progressives in the nation, and figure out when is the appropriate time to lift that moratorium. It needs to be done thoughtfully with support from the feds for renters subsidy and support for those who are holding the mortgages. It needs to be done with support from the state to see when is the right time to do that so that we can make sure that we do not have this tsunami of evictions that so many people clamor about. And we need to be positioned for that too. We need to think about the high cost of housing, taking advantage of our advantages. We, as Ann stated, and we should drill down on that, we just get in our own way. We do have assets. We are the city of Los Angeles. We have land. We have the capacity to expedite our zoning, to expedite our planning, to expedite our fees or waive our fees. We have an incredible Department of Water and Power. We have a lot of resources that we need to just put to full bear on this problem. Rather than have those assets get in our way, we need to have them help us clear the way for us to go forward. This question of CEQA abuse is an amazing one, because what ultimately happens is that we are abusing the environment by perpetuating homelessness and underdevelopment in our cities. We are not creating the equity that we need in our cities with respect to addressing this issue, simply because CEQA is used as a tool to block our efforts of this progressive agenda of getting people off the streets. We need to figure out how to utilize SB2, which is fair share zoning. We talk about us trying to solve this problem as if we are an island, and we are not. There are those 87 other cities in the county. I'm glad that Culver City is stepping forward, or maybe Santa Monica is stepping forward, or Redondo Beach or Torrance. But we need all the cities to step forward. People are not born downtown into homelessness. This is an old speech of mine that says, why must the 14th district be the epicenter of homelessness in LA County? We need to make sure that all the cities are complying with fair share zoning, that they are doing their fair share. They know what their housing plans are. They know what their needs are. They know what they need to do to permit the development of the housing and the services in their cities. With that, we would make incredible progress towards solving the problems for the city of Los Angeles if we weren't trying to solve the problems for the 87 other cities in the county of Los Angeles. And so I offer those as things to think about in terms of prevention strategies, in terms of us making sure that everybody is doing this and doing their fair lift. Also, let me commend my colleague Kevin for his heroic efforts last Friday, confronting what all of us confront each and every day in our districts and our departments, and becoming fully aware of what the challenges are with our bureaucracies. We need a si se puede disposition, both in the city, in our 15 districts, and in the county, and we need it now more than ever. So, Madam Chair, thank you for your incredible leadership on this, your patience, for your tolerance of the sloganeering, for your tolerance of the abuse that you have to deal with each and every day that you lead us in council. That is not helpful. It serves no positive influence on us in terms of moving our work forward to make sure that we can make sure that no one sleeps in the streets of the city of Los Angeles without.
I credit my mother; she raised me well. Let me ask you a couple of questions for our CAO. So where are we on our goal to meet our deadline set by the city and the county's MOU?
So currently we have more than the 6,700 interventions that are in the MOU in development. Overall, we are looking good to meet that goal. The April 16th goal, we are currently going over all of the projects that are expected to complete by April 16th and those that are on the bubble to see what we can do to better ensure that they can complete by April 16th. And we'll have a better idea of where we are relative to that goal by the end of the month. By the end of February. Yes, by the end of February. Okay, I just need you to keep this council appraised. I do not want to have a situation where we're going into federal court and be reprimanded by Judge Carter because we have not met the April 16th deadline. This is a conversation where we need to be honest with each other and not feed into this narrative out there that we're not. There is something to say about the city not moving fast enough, but there's also something to be said about not being transparent. Yes. And I think we need to be very honest whether we're going to meet that goal or not. And it's better to come up and say it now so we can have a conversation with Judge Carter and not pretend like, this deadline isn't there. I think we need to make sure that we keep to that and be honest with each other. So I would appreciate an update on that as soon as you can. In terms of where's LASA at with our rapid rehousing vouchers? And the reason I ask is how are the vouchers being utilized? Do we know how many unhoused individuals have actually been served with the vouchers? Because I want to know what our goal is over the next couple of months when it comes to this voucher program. So 499 placements have already been made of the 3,000. 499? 499, yes. We are working with LASA on, that is another, in addition to the project review, we've also requested a true up of what the actual target what the target is that they can stick to for April 16th, and we are working with them to get that back this week, actually. So that'll be a part of what we're able to provide at the end of February as far as the overall progress towards that 5,300, well, 6,000 total goal for April 16th.
Well, 499 is not even half.
Right. So that's why we're looking ahead. So as I was saying before, there were some issues with getting ramped up with the contracts, and also there's also been a real effort to try and recruit more landlords to participate in the program and get units leased up. I'm getting more information about what kind of units are actually in the pipeline and available to get leased up, and so that's part of what's playing into the target by April 16th. But that's exactly what I absolutely hear you, and we're pushing hard to try and maximize that number, but also get a number that losses can actually hit, so we know where we are relative to the 50.
And this is why I brought this up early on. Is like if we're going to award them any additional money, we need to ensure that they're meeting their goals and not simply transferring money for the sake of transferring money. If they cannot meet these goals, I think we need to know that.
Understood.
And so, please, if you said by the end of this week that you should have some sort of update on the voucher program from LASA, can you transmit some sort of memo to all of our office in terms of where we are with this program, how many individuals have been served with the vouchers thus far, and how we foresee them meeting this goal by April 16th?
We could do that.
I would prefer that as soon as possible as opposed to by the end of the month.
Yes, understood.
We will do that, and I would just add that the 499 is as of December 31st. The other thing that Meg is working on with LASA and your offices is a discussion on the allotment of the vouchers going forward. So based on the needs for the individual council districts.
Okay. And I hear the frustration from not only our city residents, but by my colleagues in terms of how difficult it is to build in the city. And I think we still need to desperately find more rapid solutions to our homeless crisis in addition to actually building supportive housing. So, this includes creating the interim housing that we've been talking about, bridge shelters, purchasing hotels, which everybody continues to advocate for, creating tiny home communities, which I'm paying attention to what Mr. Kokorian has done in his district. But I also know that HHH was never supposed to really solve all of our problems. And I think we have to be honest with each other when it comes to that. It was definitely a tool among the vast assortment of things that we need to do, but it wasn't supposed to solve every single one of our problems. And I think we have to acknowledge the success of the program, but also recognize that we have a lot of more work to do and it needs to be improved upon. So Anne, I appreciate you being with us. I know we've surpassed our time together. My question to you is, how does our city land use process and zoning, how would you describe that? And is it slowing the creation of housing? And what are our strategies to fixing that? Because I know that's been an ongoing issue that I'm looking into, bringing forth a motion to try to deal with some of our antiquated zoning rules that definitely do not help us in trying to expedite some of these projects. Can you just sort of touch upon this?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. And honestly, it's your time I'm worried about. I would spend days and days talking about supportive housing if you allowed me to. So thank you for this opportunity. So, when the supportive housing zoning ordinance was being developed, there was talk amongst the planners and the advocates that it would be great to use it to get rid of T and Q conditions that create little individual zones for every single project in many parts, your district, other districts, really the whole city, which are so problematic. And they also were on city-owned land. And at the time, had we could we see into the future and realize that we would have this magic exemption from CEQA, I think people would have proposed it, but it would have just created a much more difficult process in going through the CEQA analysis. So we didn't. But if we were going to amend it at some point, that might be something to think about. It's always tough because we do so much and yet we need to do so much more. The city of LA issued 75% of the multifamily building permits in the county of Los Angeles in the last 2 years, and we only have 40% of the people. We issued 20% of the permits for the whole state, and we only have 10% of the people. So we are way doing more than, 20 of our fellow 87 cities didn't produce any units at all. And then we have others that are really starting to ramp up, which is great. So we already do a lot of the things that have been identified as things we could make things go faster. We allow, multifamily development on commercial sites, by right, which is rare across the state, and other things like that. But we still could do things like try to get rid of the T&Q conditions, try to, the use of city-owned land in many cases is a revenue issue. Every time we ask our friends at the Department of Transportation to get rid of the replacement parking, that's a revenue impact on them, and we need to be aware of that. So I think there's a discussion that we just need to have overall about, is this the highest priority, and how do we make up those losses for other departments and other parts of the city?
Thank you, Anna. I certainly appreciate your time. Thank you, ladies. Mr. Buscaino, to conclude, because I need to close off.
Madam President, I know some of the members raised some issues on the social services portion, Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Krikorian, valid points, but I understand, Madam President, continuing this discussion, we're going to focus on another panel on mental health resources, correct?
Moving forward, like I indicated when we first started discussing this item, this is the first of a series of conversations in this council that we're all getting the same information, and then we can act on recommendations that we plan to bring forward. So yes.
Very helpful.
So this is
Thank you
the
so much,
first
Madam
of a
President.
series of conversations in council, yes. Thank you, Mr. Buscaino. Ladies, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate your time, and we're gonna have you back in council in the near future. Please get the information on the voucher program.
Yes, ma'am.
And our deadline to meet the 6,700 based on the MOU that we negotiated with the county to meet Judge Carter's deadline. So thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. Madam Clerk, what's next?
Thank you, Madam President. Council has motions for posting and referral. Motions will be posted on the City Clerk's website shortly after the meeting for the public's viewing. To subscribe to receive copies of today's council motions to your email, please visit clerk.lacity.org.
Okay, posted and referred. Members, are there any announcements? Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam President. I am announcing the retirement of someone who is rarely seen, but the results of his work are seen by millions, and that is the retirement of Jason Ball. Jason Ball, it is an honor to recognize him on the occasion of his retirement after 12 years of service to KTLA, which is located in Hollywood in the 13th District. Jason is Vice President and News Director at KTLA TV. Since joining the station in September of 2008, he has more than doubled the amount of television news programming at the station from 32 hours a week to 78.5 hours a week, so that we can all enjoy local news by all the beautiful broadcasters at KTLA 5, some of the best looking people in the business. And Jason provides the backbone of those operations. The newsroom also produces 10 hours of live streaming only news, Alexa flash briefings, and an array of podcasts. Under Jason's leadership, the KTLA 5 Morning News has become the highest rated newscast in Southern California. Prior to KTLA, Jason spent 7 years in Los Angeles at KCBS2, KCAL 9, and KNBC 4 as an executive producer and producer. He oversaw different day parts, special projects in emerging technologies. Day parts are the dividing of broadcast day, the broadcast day into several different parts. That's what that means. Jason is a 27-year veteran of local television news. He's also worked at WREG TV in Memphis, Tennessee, where he covered stories such as the West Memphis 3 and WPLG TV in Miami, covering the murder of Gianni Versace and the Elian Gonzalez saga. Jason is the host of the News Director's Office, a podcast about local media and its importance. He is also a backyard beekeeper. Thank you for that, Jason. And fifth generation Arkansan. Jason is also a major supporter of several charities, including something close to my heart, Project Angel Food and the LGBT Los Angeles Center. Jason would be with us today live, except he's working. Therefore, the City of Los Angeles recognizes Jason Ball on the occasion of his retirement from Hollywood's very own KTLA 5. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. Any other announcements, members? Any adjourning motions? Ms. Rodriguez?
Thank you, Madam President. Sadly, I do, colleagues, have two adjourning motions. We've tragically lost two more members of our Los Angeles Police Department. Colleagues, I ask that today we adjourn in the memory of LAPD Security Officer Dexter de los Santos, who died from complications of COVID-19 on January 29th, 2021. Dexter served the City of Los Angeles as a full-time security guard at the Security Services Division for more than 8 years. On behalf of the city family, our deepest and most heartfelt condolences go to the De Los Santos family, his friends, and his colleagues. May he rest in peace. And I also ask that we adjourn in memory of LAPD Sergeant Patricia Guillen, who passed away on January 28th from complications of COVID. Sergeant Guillen was with the City of Los Angeles for nearly 23 years and was last assigned to the 77th Street Division. Her passing is a huge loss to our city and her family. May she rest in peace.
Any other adjourning motions? Mr. De Leon?
Madam President, we'll do it next week.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other adjourning motions, members? Mr. Cedillo?
Madam President, thank you so much. This is really just kind of direct, personal. This country lost one of its greatest labor leaders in its history of the American labor movement, a man that I was honored and privileged to know, to work for, and a man who helped modernize the American labor movement. John J. Sweeney came up through the ranks. His father had been a union leader in New York. He came up through the ranks, attended college at night, was an elevator operator, and helped transform what was once known as the Building Service Employees International Union, later SEIU, helped it grow from 600,000 to 1.1 million by affiliating with other unions, embracing the public sector. Most importantly, and he was one of the most powerful men in this country, most importantly, as he went over to the AFL-CIO, he helped modernize this labor movement because he brought in groups that were outside labor. Labor's history was mostly of white men. That was the battle between the AFL and the CIO. He brought in women, people of color, the LGBTQ community, immigrants, young people, created what was called Union Summer. As I said, I had the privilege of knowing him, meeting him, being able to work for him when I was the head of local SEIU. During our tenure at SEIU, we were part of a broad coalition to fight Proposition 187. You've heard me mention that often. That could not have occurred without the leadership and the support of John Sweeney. Mr. Ridley Thomas will remember that in 1996, there was a heroic effort. We built the first coalition in the city to protect healthcare, to keep LA healthy. And it was Mr. Sweeney working with people like Dennis Rivera, with the health director, with the board of supervisors, and with Bill Clinton, who brought in $1.5 billion to the County of Los Angeles, helped us build the public-private partnerships. He was an extraordinary man, loved his wife, Maureen. He would practice going home every day, regardless of where he was in the nation. Now think of that. Sometimes he'd come for an afternoon meeting with the Justice for Janitors campaign and race to an airport to get back home. He never wanted to not be home with his wife at the end of the day. And yet he would have meetings all over the country. It was extraordinary. So just let me say this about John. I really love this man. He taught me one thing I think was very important. He was a really powerful man. I remember the first meeting I had with him in Portland, Oregon. I had to go meet him. I was a new union leader. And what he taught me was that powerful people don't have to raise their voice. They don't have to be big exhibitionists. They don't have to be big performers. That they can be polite. They can be humble. They can be kind. And they can be generous. One of the most powerful men in the world was yet one of the kindest, thoughtful, would remember everything about you, would emulate you, would make jokes with you. He was so modest. He was old school. When he brought in all these communities into the labor movement, he brought them into the main building. He would say, you guys aren't going to be at the kiddies table. He said, you guys need to be sitting at the main table. You need to be fully part and parcel of this new American labor movement. And he really believed in this. He was just a beautiful man. And we lost him, 86 years young, just a few days ago. God bless him. God bless his family. Rest in power, John Sweeney. Thank you.
Madam
Thank you,
President,
Mr.
may
Cedillo.
I
Mr. Ridley Thomas.
I'd be honored to, with your consent, Madam President, Mr. Cedillo, to sign on as one who knew John Sweeney and want to salute his history and his legacy for us all. He embodied the notion that all labor has dignity. To the extent that we know that to be the case, I'd be honored to join with you, Mr. Cedillo.
Thank you, sir. Any other adjourning motions? Okay, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.